So good evening. Welcome to today's live stream. I'm here in Odesa. Mama decided to shoot this one in this apartment as my electricity is pretty stable. Okay, playing it also on my laptop there. And since the last few times I did live streams here from Odesa, we had power outages at different times. It was about maybe a month ago. And I was in a cafe, quite noisy. So let me know if you can hear me clearly. Hopefully we have no problem with the mics that we had a few editions ago. So welcome. It is now late January 2026. So belated Happy New Year if you haven't joined one of these live streams in 2026 so far. I think I had just one, right, in 2026. And today we're going to discuss Ukraine in 2026 versus the safe options. Is it too risky or is it worth it to come in 2026 to Ukraine? And there's been a lot of geopolitical developments in the last few weeks. It has definitely not been, there's never been a dull moment under the Trump administration, to say the least. So I'll be doing a little bit of a comparison with some of the other options where I bring my clients. Normally I'm bringing them to alternatives like Moldova, Kazakhstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Poland. Maybe in the future I'll also bring clients to Romania and to Czechia. And I'd also like to do a little bit of a contrast with, say, other regions in the world, especially in light of what's been going on geopolitically. So maybe Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, maybe even just hanging out in Western Europe or the US. So if you have preferences or questions, the format of these live streams is that I give a presentation and then I answer your questions. So drop your questions and your comments down below in the comments section as we're going through the presentation, and we can have a good constructive conversation in due course. So if you're new to this content, my name is Connor Klein. I have this channel, New Europe Experience. It has been rebranded over the last few years with the Russo-Ukrainian War. It used to be called the Czar Experience back in the day. And basically I help my high-level clients living their best lives here in the region that I've dubbed New Europe. So before 2022, I had the biggest channel for a high-level lifestyle in Ukraine. I had spent the entire COVID period here. And in 2018, 2019, I was filming mainly in Ukraine and in Belarus. And between 2020 and 2022, I was exclusively here. I did not leave Ukraine at all during the COVID lockdowns. It was one of the best places in the world to be at that time. And obviously then events have overtaken us, and it's maybe not the best place to be in the world for sure, I would say, in 2026. However, it can still be a good fit for the right type of guy. And I will also then make it valuable in doing a contrast with some of the alternatives and what's likely to happen, because obviously the world is a little bit upended geopolitically, especially in Western Europe and North America. And okay, I will come to the questions in due course. So before I get into today's presentation, let me just update you on some developments I've seen in the broader region in the last few weeks since I last did one of these live streams. So the EU's roaming area has been extended to Moldova and Ukraine. So one of the big issues in the past, I remember with my cell phone, was that when you went from one European country to another, one EU member state to another, then you had to pay these ridiculous roaming charges. And then they created this EU roaming area. I used to work as a lawyer even at the European Commission. I specialized in European law, European competition law. So this was something that I was very familiar with when they introduced these new rules. And now it's basically like moving from one state to another state in the US. You don't pay any roaming charges within the EU. And now they've gone and they extended it outside the EU or the European Economic Area to Ukraine and Moldova. That means that if you have a SIM card from, say, Germany, France, and you come to Ukraine, it will work. There will be no roaming charges. It will be exactly the same. Same for Moldova. They're actually going to extend that to Montenegro and Albania later this year. So that's a good development. It only really came up for one of my clients who came here, in a person who was from Western Europe, and his provider actually had crazy roaming charges when we got to Moldova. So, and I think also in Ukraine, so we just got local SIM cards. That is always the alternative. I have the Ukrainian SIM card. It also works with a certain amount of roaming when I go into the European Union and I go to other countries. So that's all great. It should be all just one now roaming area. So you could buy a SIM card in one country and travel across all the way to Moldova or Ukraine. Schengen, just an update on the Schengen area, since a lot of my, especially North American viewers and clients, it's something that's pertinent to their experience in the region, since in the Schengen area, you have 90 days every 180 visa-free, same for Brits, since they left the European Union with Brexit. And the Schengen area extended last year to also Romania and Bulgaria. Now, there is one other country that is likely to come in pretty soon, and that is Cyprus. And I read online that it's now only going to happen at the earliest beginning of 2027. So for 2026, the Schengen area will probably not expand any further. So what some people do if they don't have an EU passport, obviously if you have an EU passport, then you can live and travel as much as you want anywhere within the European Union. You don't have any of these problems with the Schengen area. And doing what's known as the Schengen shuffle, which is when you spend 90 days in the Schengen area, then you leave. Maybe you come here to Ukraine, maybe you go to Moldova, maybe you go to Serbia, maybe you go to Kazakhstan, maybe you just go to the United Kingdom. Then that 90 days and of the 180 days, now you're going to have to keep in mind that if you were to go to Cyprus, just check the rules and check the updates before you go, just in case you join Schengen in the meantime. But the update is that it's going to be delayed until 2027. They're actually already ready to join, but for some reason politically they pushed it back until 2027. That's what I read is the latest. Ireland is in the European Union, but not in Schengen, so you could also fly to Ireland if you wanted to spend 90 days or part of those 90 days outside before you come back in. Eurozone. Bulgaria joined the Eurozone on the 1st of January. So now you can use euros in Bulgaria. The lev it will disappear in the next, I guess, 6 months. You can still, I think, pay with it for now. If you have some lev, you happen to be going to Bulgaria. And the Eurozone will probably not expand any further, won't enlarge anymore, or no new countries are likely to join it for probably another few years. So this will be probably the last country to join in this decade. I think it'll be 2030 before any other country join, because there's a certain amount of criteria that you have to fulfill, and they're quite onerous, and it has to be the political will to join. So maybe Romania will be the next in 2030. Montenegro, they actually already used the euro because they never introduced their own currency when they became independent. They used to use the German Deutschmark. So when the Deutschmark was phased out, they used the euro. So you can already use euros there. And in a lot of countries nearby, then they accept euros de facto anyways, because they're maybe a small country like Albania. It can be often quite common that you'd be able to pay with them. Speaking of Bulgaria, I did speak with Alina MacLeod, who I interviewed, I think it was back in 2021, maybe it was even earlier. And she is based in Bulgaria. She's a Canadian YouTuber, and we will probably do another, at least I invite her around to do an interview. We'll probably do a video in the coming weeks or something like that. I just have to check her schedule. And so that's coming up on the channel. Will be interesting to get a perspective from Bulgaria. It is attractive tax-wise, so that can be an option for some guys. Since we're discussing alternatives, EU enlargement, here, obviously Ukraine is a candidate country, Moldova is a country, Montenegro is a candidate country, so is Albania. At the moment, there is a Hungarian veto, basically, or Viktor Orban is blocking any progress with the applications of Moldova and Ukraine. Something to look out for. There are elections in Hungary in April, and Orban, at least when I look on Polymarket, which is a better indicator than the polls nowadays, when we look at elections, he's expected to lose power at the moment. So that would then free that up, and we possibly will see it by 2030 in the case of Moldova. That's the target date. Montenegro's target date is 2028, but I think they may slip on that. So we might see the next expansion of the European Union in 2030. But very speculative, because we're obviously a long way away. Some housekeeping before I start today's presentation, which is obviously Ukraine, coming to Ukraine 2026, whether it's worth the risk or not, and then comparing it to some of the other options here in the region and internationally. I have made some progress. If you invest in my Ukrainian language program, I have at least written out what I think is going to be most of the course. So you will be getting an email pretty soon on that. I know I'm delayed on it, but it will finally be launched pretty soon. If you're interested in it, in joining this late stage, because since I haven't actually started it yet, then you can drop me an email, connor@connorklein.com. That's down below in the description to this live stream, my email address. So just send me an email, tell me you're interested, and you can still join it. So hopefully I'm going to film the first videos for that program later this week. If you are traveling to the region, to Ukraine or Moldova, I have guides that will help you immensely when you come here, not just with the safety or the logistics, also because I have hospitality guides. So the best, or at least my favorite cafes, restaurants, bars, clubs, and shisha lounges in 5 Ukrainian cities. So here in Odesa, Kyiv, Lviv, Chernovtsi, and Uzhhorod, and then also for Chisinau, Moldova is the other guide, and I have my vineyard recommendations, having gone and enjoyed lots of that tasty Moldovan wine. Actually, I got an email or a message. I had a short exchange with a previous client who told me he's now engaged. So it is something that's interesting. We might discuss a little bit in the Q&A, since a lot of guys are interested in the region for dating and relationships. I started with this previous branding, but at least this lifestyle channel back in 2018. And it's interesting with, so many years gone by, how many clients have actually got married, had families, had kids. It wasn't necessarily the objective when we started. When I started making this, at least when I started making this content when they came, but this is the result. So it is rewarding me. He actually sent me a nice message about how my advice had been invaluable to him, and obviously he's super happy with what has transpired. So yeah, I also had a client who had a child pretty recently, who was in many of my videos. Both of them were actually in my videos over the last few years, Paul and Philip. So that's pretty cool. There were some other guys who obviously gave testimonies with that respect, especially when I was back in the days of Minsk in Belarus, here in Ukraine as well. Some of them have married Ukrainians, Belarusians, and other women from the region. So yeah, it is something that wasn't the explicit goal of this channel, and obviously I don't run a marriage agency or a mail order bride business. We can comment a little bit on that, as inevitably we end up doing to a certain extent. So this is one of the things I get asked the most questions about on this channel, but it is great to see the long-term impact that this channel and my mentoring has had on many of my clients and my viewers, and see new families based either in the region or with women from the region. It's all, nearly all my clients are not from there. I did have one guy who's actually Moldovan who invested in some of my programs because he had lived in North America and then was coming back to Moldova, and found it valuable for him to get the perspective, since he hadn't been in the country for a long time. So yeah, one of the things that he told me was that, of course, he learned the local language. It's not a sine qua non. You can come here and be successful without just use English, but it's going to be pretty tough, and you're going to have to make sacrifices in other ways. And definitely for relationships, you will have a big advantage if you can speak the local language. He actually learned it from scratch, and in his case it was Russian he learned. And yeah, he really invested like 3 years into it. I think he met his now fiance maybe after about 2.5 years. And I think that's something that I see with the guys who do get married, do start families. It's not like they came for one actually did come for a week. It's true with me, back in Minsk, back in 2019. And actually, I think I had another client who actually came just on a trip with me, and that was it. And he did meet his wife. But in general, most of them, they spend a good amount of time. It's not something that happens very quickly, but they're investing in their skill set, building up their value, and making contacts in the region, spending a lot of time. That is one of the key components. And he also learned Russian to fluency. He's definitely my client who learned the best of a local language that I've had since I started this channel. So that's something that's pretty cool that, yeah, he told me yesterday. So something to celebrate. And yeah, I definitely must have the most clients who have married models, I think, of all time, because as a lifestyle channel, because that's normally the category of guy that, at least for the in-person experience, who I meet in person, not that all of them are married models, but people, some of my clients marry women who are not modeling, but maybe they're at that level or not far off it, that's for sure. But then again, this is the region of the world where you're going to find that the most, the highest concentration of model beauty in the world. Also, my Ukrainian investment program, Ukraine from Destruction Opportunity, still haven't started it formally. So if you're interested in that, maybe you're interested in investing, we can discuss it obviously on this live stream. Real estate, or is coming to spend time here, then that is something that will accelerate your experience. I'm going to start it pretty soon after I actually got the Ukrainian language program finally out. Then we will start that. So take a look at it. I did a live stream for it especially, so you'll see a link down below and go watch that. And if you're interested, then you can reach out to me again, Connor@connorklein.com. There's even a link to join there on that page. And yeah, I may actually spend more time in Kyiv, the capital, this year than here in Odesa. As an update on the situation here in Ukraine, probably, if you've been paying attention to the news, seen that Kyiv, the capital, has been badly hit by Russian either missile or drone strikes, where they took out a lot of the energy, heating, and, well, the electricity, the water, and the heating is out for a lot of people for the last week. It's been terrible. The weather here in Ukraine, it is the depths of winter, and it's been down to about -20 in the Kyiv region. So that's been extremely tough. It's been a deliberate strategy by Russia to punish and oppress the civilian population. I mean, the Jews' political reason is that they are hoping that this will persuade the Ukrainian population to capitulate, basically, or support a capitulation. Historically, that isn't supported by the empirical evidence of doing this strategy at all. It's more likely to backfire, and that's what I see in Ukraine. Here in Odesa, and one of the reasons I took the risk of doing this live stream here in my apartment, where if the electricity goes out, that's the end of our live stream, to be frank, because you're not going to see me, and I'll just stop it there. But I've actually only had an issue in this apartment once in the last month. It was out for just 2 hours. So basically, compared to back in December or in late November, the electricity situation here in Odesa is a lot better. I haven't had any problem with heating personally, or with my water. Heating and water, I only had a problem for a few hours all winter. So it really does depend where you are. In the center of Ukraine, big cities like Dnipro, Zaporizhia, it's also problematic with energy and water and electricity. It's a pretty terrible situation. It's also extremely cold here in Odesa, it's a lot milder, so it hasn't gotten as cold, although we're by the sea, so it feels almost as cold when you go outside. And in parts of Odesa, there has been some problems with electricity. In the west of Ukraine, again, a lot less problems with electricity as well this winter. So really the focus for, I think, any of you who are planning to come is going to be about Kyiv. And it's interesting, I am considering starting a new business. It's also why I talk about my investment program that you can go check out if you go look down below. And I may actually start to spend a lot more time in Kyiv. I actually haven't been in Kyiv for 3 years. I was looking at my footage today, and the last time I filmed was in April 2023 in Kyiv, the capital. I just never have had a need to go there. With any of my clients who came in person, we were in Lviv and in Chernovtsi, and also they came here to Odesa. So, and with the route out, I mean, to go to the nearest airport here, it is Chisinau. Otherwise, I was going to Lviv and maybe out to Poland. So yeah, I just haven't had a reason to go up to Kyiv, but I will probably be going there, but not right now with the situation with electricity and heating. I'll obviously wait until after the winter. And some of the alternatives, I think I already mentioned those to you. If you want to discuss, you want my opinion on this broader region versus Africa or Latin America or Southeast Asia or Western Europe or North America, write your questions in the comment section below the live stream, and also the comparison of maybe some of the other countries in this region, in particular Poland or with Moldova or the 3 Baltic states as we group them together, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. I think those are the most pertinent. And yeah, the country that I actually have the most interest in the last few months is Kazakhstan. So I was there back in October, had one of the best client trips ever, in-person immersion. And if you're interested in that, of course, you can apply via the link down below in the description. And we'll be going back there very soon. The dates are not 100% finalized, but I have several clients. I think it's at least 3. And then I mentioned on the last live stream of one client who paid me, who's with me in 2023, paid me a deposit to come back. I haven't heard from him for years, so I don't know what's going on. I'll send him a message again after this live stream. Hey, are you still going to come, since he's already paid the deposit? So he should show up at some stage. But yeah, that is interesting, and we can discuss that obviously as a comparison with Ukraine, and I will mention it at times in this live stream. So keep your questions coming, you can see them, and I will come to that after the presentation. I will, hopefully, as long as we don't have some electricity outage. I will make this a pretty long live stream relative to some of the others. So why am I even talking about Ukraine? I mean, for people who, I know this is now a very niche part of my channel, or the niche part of the internet at all, traveling to Ukraine, unless you are coming here. Of course, there are people who really come here for reasons that are specific to the war. So obviously people help with the humanitarian effort, the defense of the country. Also people who are journalists come here, different NGOs, foreign dignitaries and diplomats, and people who have obviously family here. My clients who come in general are guys who have a significant other, like a wife, fiance or girlfriend from Ukraine. So maybe they have family here. One of my clients is actually going to come next month here. He's going to go and see his wife's family in Zaporizhia, and then they may come down to Odessa. If I'm still here, I will meet up with them. And the other clients who've come with me, some were actually thinking of moving to Ukraine, didn't have any significant other, but see their future post-war in Ukraine and coming here to do the reconnaissance now on what this Ukraine is like, even though it's got a wartime situation. Also, one of them, he actually did a comparison with Moldova, and he actually said he preferred Moldova in spite of the fact that things are a lot cheaper in Ukraine. That is another thing to point out, is that obviously real estate, it's not at the same price level as it would be otherwise if there weren't a war. That makes sense, because obviously it's riskier. So for certain type of guys who are a little bit more risk-taking, then that can be quite attractive. On top of that, there is a lot of investment in the defense industry. It makes a lot of sense. Basically, Ukraine and Russia are going to be kind of the leading pioneers in a lot of new types of warfare. For better or worse, that's what's worked out. So those industries are quite lucrative, and there's a lot of foreign interest in them. Also, agriculture industry is enormous in Ukraine. If Ukraine joins the European Union, there's a thing called a common agricultural policy, which is basically agricultural subsidies for farmers in the European Union. And from my understanding, on the current rules, if Ukraine were to join, they would actually get more than 50% of all the subsidies. Their agriculture sector is that big. Now, before they join, I'm almost certain that that will all be reformed, or they won't let the Ukrainians get the access to the same amount, because politically, probably some countries like Ireland has also reasonably, well, I don't know how much of the economy it's worth nowadays, but at least in the hearts of Irish people, farming is quite important. France is also a big agriculture producer that tends to have a lot of political clout. So that is an industry a lot of people invest in. The other thing is real estate. So that is what I think nearly all my clients look like when they come here. And there have been some developments, actually, because of the situation in Kyiv. Now there are more discounts on, especially a lot of top-end properties that I've been seeing. At least one of my clients told me about it the other day. So that's something that we will explore on my program. So again, if you're interested, go check out that live stream, and we will start in the coming weeks, or maybe it might be a bit over a month. So there is obviously the very clear caveat, like, don't come to Ukraine if you're not okay with coming to a country at war. I always tell like anecdote in these live streams that I had one inquiry from a guy who had spoken to a, I would say, ill-advised matchmaker. We could say the word, a dodgy matchmaker, who was telling me, yeah, just come to Ukraine, and then he would match him with all these women. And I asked the guy, are you willing to go to a country at war? Do you realize that there's going to be air alerts, there's a curfew, you might be close to explosions? I mean, the statistical chance of being injured or killed is pretty low. If you're in a big city, you're obviously not going to go to the front lines. So it's, when I put into ChatGPT, it was during the summer, it was like 1 in a million per capita per day is the risk level. And that's actually out safer than most American big cities, because the crime is so high there. So if you do that comparison, it's not insanely dangerous, but it's more the psychological impact of coming here. And obviously spend a lot of time here like I have. I spent about half the last 4 years here. And yeah, then it goes up. We're talking about how many days then have I been here since there's been a war? Probably about 700, I guess, altogether, maybe plus or minus. And then that goes up 700 times. But if you're coming for, a 10-day trip or spend a few weeks, it's not statistically a high probability that you'll be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But you will definitely, well, almost certainly experience air alerts, the curfew for sure, unless you're in Zakarpatsky Oblast, the only part of Ukraine that doesn't have a curfew. And you have to be psychologically prepared for that. But this guy obviously wasn't. So I was like, don't be foolish. You can go to the alternatives. You can go to Poland. Like, there's so many Ukrainian women who are single, live in Poland, in Warsaw, the capital. Or you can go to 3 Baltic states, or you can go to Moldova. Like, why would you go to Ukraine? That was the basic point I was going to make with him. So definitely don't consider coming here unless you're at least psychologically prepared. That's my main caveat that I give with this. Maybe I start, because I wanted to talk a little bit about just the geopolitical developments before I get into Ukraine, because I think the reason I put inverted commas like safe options is that there's a lot of uncertainty geopolitically. We've seen with the Trump administration, obviously the Operation Maduro, and in particular a lot of threats by the Trump administration towards countries in Latin America. So Cuba, for example, which is allied with not just Venezuela, but also Russia and China, and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he's of Cuban descent, would be probable that he would be particularly a big fan of seeing the current Cuban government overthrown and replaced by something that's more favorable to Washington. So maybe at some point we're going to see more action in Latin America. Also, there were threats to the Colombian government, and in particular, a lot of guys from North America and Western Europe and other parts of the world, they go and they try to live the kind of the digital nomad lifestyle, or maybe the passport bro lifestyle. We'll get to that a little bit, some developments with that kind of shenanigans later on in this live stream. And they go there. Can't say it's as safe as it looked 6 months ago. Since then, we've seen the threats by Trump to Greenland. He, for the moment, has decided not to launch an invasion of Greenland, as batshit crazy as that sounds. And we will see what will happen in the coming months. There was enough deterrence by the Danes, it seems, and their European allies, even though they didn't send so many troops there. The fact that the Danish soldiers had rules of engagement to actually fire live ammunition, at least that's what they said. That's a good part of deterrence. You want to deter your adversary by pushing up the perceived cost of using military force, and that seems to have played into it, along with obviously the markets not reacting very well to the possibility that the US would invade the territory of another NATO member, another part of NATO, and try to annex it in a 19th century imperialist style way, very similar to what Moscow has done here with trying to seize Ukraine and illegally annexing certain parts of the country. For now, that is the situation. So we're seeing a lot of instability and uncertainty. And for example, if the US does invade Greenland, then just think about how things look for smaller and medium-sized countries across the globe. I mean, Russia's already tried to change the principle that you can't acquire territory of another country through military force by invading your neighbor. And they are one of the 5 permanent countries that have a seat at the UN Security Council. Then if you see the US do it, what's going to happen with Taiwan and China? I actually don't think China, well, for now, I'm not an expert in Chinese affairs, so my opinion on China is not worth very much, but I think they're just a lot more strategic. I think they will probably push for reunification over, it's probably through some political process, which is actually what Russia was trying to do here in Ukraine, but they failed because their proxies or their allied politicians weren't popular enough, basically, at the end of the day, to keep Kyiv in Moscow's orbit. But if you see the leading countries, the bigger powers in the world, I wouldn't really call Russia a big power. It's more a regional power. It's not a global power. China has obviously the potential to become a rival and even usurp the US as the main superpower in the long term. So actually, I guess in principle, is the European Union, although they don't have the military capacity and haven't invested in it. So for now, they're obviously only relevant really in the diplomatic and economic part of the equation, but definitely not in the military. So if you see that happening, then what does that mean for all the other countries? If there's not going to be any rules-based order, as ineffectively as it worked partially, in any case since World War II, Mark Carney, the leader of Canada, had a very interesting speech at Davos last week about where he said basically it doesn't exist anymore. And it is not that it existed 100% anyways before that. People are obviously aware of that. It was very hard to enforce international law because there's no enforcement mechanism, there's no world police, and the major countries have a veto in the UN Security Council, so they can kind of get a lot more sway in terms of getting away with violating the rules, and they violate them with more impunity than the smaller countries. But now, if we see this move to just ignore everything by, especially by the US, then it will create this situation where you would see a lot of smaller countries decide, well, it doesn't seem like national sovereignty borders really mean much anymore. And a lot of the borders across the globe are the result of 19th century or even earlier European imperialism. And yeah, then you could see just a free-for-all in lots of different parts of the world, and a lot of countries that are promoted as being safe to go to because the West is crumbling, that kind of narrative. I wouldn't be so sure if it's a free-for-all on national borders that you're not going to see a lot of conflicts in places that people really don't anticipate, and maybe that's been sold to them now. So Latin America, for example, all those borders, we don't have as many maybe different ethnicities that would want to go start fighting and redraw the borders, but it does have a history of war and the different countries fighting over different territorial claims. You saw the Venezuelan government, I guess with Maduro gone, it's not likely to happen now, but laying claim to a large part of neighboring Guyana, for example. And you can never really anticipate what would happen, say, with Colombia and Venezuela and a lot of the other smaller countries in Central America. If suddenly national borders didn't mean very much, there's a lot of possibility that you would see war in the region. So I'm not saying it's the worst country in terms of geopolitical instability, but there is a certain amount of uncertainty, and it is not that long ago that countries there were fighting over their different borders. Africa, obviously, nearly every single border there could, in the entire continent, could be up. Maybe we'll say Cape Verde Islands, maybe not because it's islands. It's pretty clear what the geographical limits are, but all of those countries could just see so many wars and attempts to change the different national boundaries. It's not something that is promoted as much here in my general sphere, but you do see some of the passport bro movement, for example. They've gone to Africa. A lot of them are black men from the US, so maybe they just have a more specific interest in it. And yeah, investing in, I saw another channel with, you know, kind of an international investor, and he was talking about Kenya, for example, and that looks great now, but if suddenly there's a free-for-all on, in terms of national borders, don't think that Kenya would be immune to that itself, and things could get ugly very quickly, especially with the hodgepodge of different national boundaries that we have as a result of earlier European imperialism across the continent, Africa. Same with Asia. I actually spoke with a content creator who's based in Asia, and it was an interesting conversation. He's like, why would anyone go to Europe at all, blah, 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 when you could come here to Asia? And then he dropped that he'd actually been, I think, in either in Thailand, Cambodia, around the time that there was the border clashes. And I was like, yeah, but you also have uncertainty and a certain amount of instability also in Southeast Asia. And then you have obviously the possibility of China trying to militarily seize Taiwan. I think that's not really in line with the general, more shrewd, in my opinion, Chinese strategy of acquiring the resources and territory of its neighbors through stealth and political acumen rather than brute force. But all those things could flare up. There's a lot of disputed borders in the region, like India, China, maybe even potentially with Russia and China. They did have border wars back in the 50s, and there aren't so many people living on the Russian side in the Far East. Could be very easy for the Chinese to infiltrate there. Not saying there would be directly hot war, they both obviously got nuclear weapons, but could be something to raise conflict. So also Southeast Asia, it's not really so clear to me that in a new situation where national sovereignty doesn't, or territorial borders don't mean anything, that we wouldn't see a huge flare up in different conflicts also there. I think Western Europe, less of a possibility for now because they're all in, well, first of all, they're on NATO, if NATO really has that much impact at the moment with the behavior of Donald Trump. And but they do have the European Union, which was, you know, one of the reasons for creating a union and creating a polity together is to stop the interminable wars that Europe has had for basically all of its written history. Different parts of Europe have always been fighting with each other. So for now, that wouldn't be particularly a high risk, except if we look at the Balkans region. It's like a tinderbox there. World War I started in the Balkans, and not, you know, lots of parts of it aren't currently integrated into the European Union. So you've got Serbia there. You got the issue with Kosovo, which is recognized by, I think, the majority of countries in the United Nations. So we can call it, I guess, a state at this stage. But it is not recognized by even many members of the European Union. And Serbia, from what I read, is reintroduced military service for men between 18 and 27. And it's not because they're likely to get invaded themselves. So my interpretation would be that they're keeping the door open for maybe where they would be in a wartime situation where they might be the ones that would instigate it. So that would, the obvious target would be to try and reintegrate Serbia. So just think about it. If the US says that you can go and use military force to change the borders, then maybe Serbia would also be tempted to do it. Could also be with Bosnia Herzegovina, the neighboring countries. So yeah, I know there's one person in my space promotes becoming a Serb and getting a passport. I think he may also promote Bosnia. And then if he's trying to sell it on the basis that's a safe place to go to or a safe nationality to have, especially if you're a man. I presume most of his clients would be over 27. But who knows, they may expand that as they get closer to having a war. And suddenly you might find yourself, if you're on a trip back to Belgrade to check something out, being told, where's your, what's the term of art, like military document. Nowadays you have an actual QR code and a special document for it here in Ukraine. I have been asked for it. I was not asked for the first 3.5 years since 2022 with the Russian invasion, but I was asked, I think, about 4 times in the space of like 2 months at night on the street. So, and there has been an increase in desertion in the Ukrainian military. So I think that was the reason behind it. And that was in a 2-month period. So I guess it was back like kind of September, October, that kind of period. And now I haven't been asked since again. So maybe that all got, maybe it all got resolved in terms of the desertion. But anyways, it made me more aware of the fact that if you are a citizen of the country, just be careful about what nationalities you're going to get, especially in this world where a lot of countries are going to be at war with each other. I will at least advise you to reflect on whether you're willing to go and defend the country in times of war, because it may become something that you might be compelled to do or be under pressure to do in the future. For example, I am not a Ukrainian citizen, so I can always go and join the Ukrainian military if I think that is a good investment of my time, if I actually can provide value there or help them in other ways, like I've done with this channel and also with some fundraising. But it's a different situation when you're actually a citizen of the country, and then you would have an obligation. Here in Ukraine, you're not obligated to go to the military. If you are a male between now it is 23 and 60. It was 18 to 60 on day 2 of the invasion in 2022, so from February 25th. But in August, they changed the law to allow Ukrainian men between 18 and 22, inclusive, to leave the country. So a lot of them have done that. Well over 100,000 have left since August. And otherwise, you cannot leave without justification. You're not automatically obliged to go to the military, but you must have a document showing that you have registered for military service. So if they decide to call you up, then they can do so, and you're already in the register for that, and they actually can send you to you electronically the I guess what we call that, I don't know these terms are in English even, when you are called to the military, whether you have to go report at a recruitment center for the military or some sort of office somewhere. So that's what I'll say. We have should have mentioned with Latin America, we have the threat of the Monroe Doctrine, as Donald Trump wants everything to be named after him, obviously, part of his style of government, his personality, with Trump Towers. So you had the Monroe Doctrine, which was back in the 19th century, which basically was the US saying that they didn't want European colonial powers coming in anymore and trying to take more territory, more influence in the Western Hemisphere. There still are European countries that have colonies, I guess we can call them, or they're part of their metropole. So for example, you have France, French Guiana, La Guyane. They actually have 2 islands just off Canada as well. I think it's Saint-Pierre-and-Miquelon are their names, and then the British obviously have their Commonwealth, and the Dutch have certain parts of their country, or at least their, I don't know, we can't really call it an empire anymore, but they have these ties with parts of the Caribbean. So the Monroe Doctrine, as Donald Trump is trying to call it, is that basically it seemingly tried to at least talk about invading and annexing different parts of the continent. Also Canada, he's trolling Canada by publishing maps with them in the American colors, also referring to the leader of Canada, Carney, as the governor. So we have this kind of situation geopolitically, which means that a lot of places that are being sold as alternatives, I mean, you can go on a holiday to these places, I don't think you need to worry about that, but investing, buying real estate, maybe getting the nationality, not so clear if a lot of them look so smart in 2026 than they did previously. So just be aware of some of the potential risks. I do have a client who became Montenegrin, for example. It's at least a year ago now, and he became a citizen by investment, and he actually invested quite a long time ago. That program has been discontinued since, and yeah, they're now in NATO. Fortunately for Montenegro, because they're not in the European Union, there is actually a part of the treaties, the European Union treaties. I think it's TEU. Is it 70 some? It's 47 paragraph 2, which is a mutual defense clause. So for a lot of countries, they may actually want to join the European Union. It gives them kind of an extra reason if NATO is not going to be so effective as a deterrence, if the US is not committed to, or at least there's some question about the US defending its NATO allies with Donald Trump as president, then many other countries that are not in the European Union may actually have an extra reason to join. So maybe a country like Iceland might change its mind, might feel like, well, we're beside the US, maybe they're actually not going to help us. Maybe they may even become a threat. I mean, that speech at Davos where Trump said he wasn't going to invade Greenland, he said Iceland, I think about 3 or 4 times. I think it was just he got mixed up between the two, but I'm sure the Icelanders weren't particularly feeling very comfortable going to sleep very easily at night after all of that. So we may see, Norway may change its mind because it's also in the region, and it gives a bit of an extra impetus to certain countries that might end up with conflict. Say with Serbia, if you're on the border with Serbia, and there might be a conflict, say North Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, you might want to speed up your accession process to the European Union, because at least you would have legally, formally, that protection. Again, it hasn't been tested. Article 5 NATO was only activated, actually invoked once. That was by the US after 9/11. Obviously, we had Donald Trump trying to claim that wrongly, historically incorrectly, that the NATO allies of the US didn't come to their aid, which is not the case. And then he seemed to have to walk it back a bit. Yesterday, it was a huge reaction in a lot of part of Europe. And that's kind of my final point on it. I think we're going to see a little bit of a reaction politically to what Donald Trump has done, because we saw with the Canadian elections with Pierre Poilievre, his name, I'm not very familiar with Canadian politics, but I remember he had a French name, Pierre Poilievre, I wrote it down here, that he was way ahead in the polls. Admittedly, Trudeau was the premier at the time and was extremely unpopular, but he was very closely associated with MAGA and Trump and had a very similar style in his campaign. And then because of Trump's rhetoric, or to a certain extent, because Trump started trolling Canada, threatening them, saying they're going to become the 51st state, and calling Trudeau the governor, it had an adverse reaction with the Canadian public. And as a result, Carney won, coming from the same party as Trudeau. And we may see that as an effect. I think Reform, if there was an election today, they'd be expected to actually win, even though they wouldn't get a majority of the votes in the UK. And actually, Nigel Farage could become the Prime Minister. But he has been very closely associated with Trump and backing him all the time. For the first time ever, I heard him criticize Trump over his comments about NATO soldiers. It had a huge reaction. So we'll see what happens in Europe, whether this kind of rise of more MAGA, I guess, aligned parties or different politicians that the MAGA movement has backed in Europe, whether they continue to be as popular, or maybe there's a little bit of reaction with the US becoming so bellicose towards Europe in general. We've had the national security strategy that was published, which basically, and there's several other documents that are have a bit more meat on the bones, have come out of the US government in the last 2 months since that was published. And they basically don't describe really China and Russia as really the enemy. It sees China as mainly an economic competitor, and Russia is a little bit problematic, kind of a competitor in certain spheres, maybe with oil production. And really they focus on trying to undermine Europe and the European Union. So that, has probably instilled a little bit of more patriotism across Europe as a result, as a reaction. And Churchill once said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So maybe that will have a little bit of a boomerang effect, as it's had in Canada. But anyways, in grosso modo, in summary, we're going to enter now definitely a more uncertain world in terms of countries before that had a lot of peace, definitely since the end of we'll say the Cold War, with a few exceptions in Europe, it's been a relatively peaceful time. And in other parts of the world now, the Pandora's box could be really open in terms of national borders. Um, yeah, some borders have changed anyway since the Second World War, sometimes involving a certain amount of force, but in general, it's been one of the most peaceful times to be alive since probably the beginning of the agricultural revolution. Since the introduction of agriculture, humans have been killing each other en masse. I remember reading a stat that I think that only 40% of men throughout history have been able to reproduce, and 80% of women have, because men just kill themselves in part competing over the women and the right to reproduce. So in groups killing each other. So yeah, we're definitely entering a different era. You should go and watch Carney's speech. I'll put a link to it down below if I remember when I look at this on replay later. It was at Davos last week. I think it was a very unusual speech since he was so direct and I guess transparent about what the situation was before and the uncharted waters that we're now entering into. So keep your comments coming. Also geopolitics. I have a background in international relations. I studied at the time, at least, the best school in the world for international relations, Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, in both in Bologna and in Washington, D.C. A lot of the political commentators have a geopolitical background. Many of them actually went to my school I see online. I also have a geopolitics channel, and you can go and follow that if you really want to nerd out in this stuff. I have a link to that below as well. But for most people watch this, probably just the too long didn't read version is probably the the AI summary version is probably good enough. So security situation here, let's deal with, I think I already in the introduction basically dealt with this part with coming to Ukraine. As I said, when I put in chat GPT, you can use another AI, but it's, to get a rough estimate, it's 1 in a million chance per capita per day here in Ukraine. If you're in a city like Odesa, Kyiv, Lviv, it's going to be safer if you were in a city like Uzhhorod or Chernovtsi or Lviv in the west. And basically, it's not an enormous risk to come to Ukraine. Logistics, have your passport, same visa-free rules as before the invasion. Countries like the UK, my home country Ireland, European Union passports, basically all the allied countries. We'll include the US as still been allied for now, and Canada and many Latin American countries have visa-free to Ukraine. I remember I had a Bolivian client. Did he have? I think we had to get him a visa. Yeah, that's right. We had to get him a visa for Belarus for sure. I remember at the time. So if you have a nationality that has visa-free to Ukraine, you come for 90 days every 180, which means you can't just stay 90, go out for 1 day and come back in again. You'd have to stay out for 90. So you come in, your card should work, your phone should work. Now, even if you have an EU SIM card, you don't even have any roaming charges. Most of my clients who are American, they have these international plans, so it actually doesn't cost them anything extra. But you can, of course, I recommend just getting an eSIM, so you don't have to take out your original SIM that's on your phone. You just add it, and then when you want, you can just use the internet here, because it's going to be a higher speed compared to when you use normally when you use your US international plan, it's a bit slower. And yeah, there's lots of money changers. So if cash, that's not a problem. The limit crossing borders in this part of the world is 10,000 euros in cash, or the equivalent. So I think that's probably around 11,000 US dollars at the moment. It's actually a little bit more even. So don't come with more cash than that. Sometimes that will be, they will do a full search on, say, the buses coming in there. You cannot fly into Ukraine, but you can fly to neighboring countries, obviously, like Moldova, Chisinau, nearest here to Odessa. There's like maybe 20, maybe 30 buses a day going from Chisinau airport to Odessa, and it takes about 4 or 5 hours normally. There are sometimes delays at the border. So that's more a problem with Poland, I find, than with Moldova or Hungary or Slovakia or Romania. So you could fly to Budapest. I've traveled from Budapest by train to Western Ukraine, to Uzhhorod, namely, or you could go to Slovakia. So you have Kosice, is a city in the east of Slovakia, not very far from Uzhhorod also. Then most people fly into Warsaw. You can take the night train to Kyiv. You can actually wake up next day in Kyiv, or you can take a bus from Kyiv. Again, it's about 24 hours probably, maybe a bit less. I don't like to take the bus all the way. I hate night buses, so I always stop in Lviv for a day, or I go down to Chernovtsi. So it's pretty easy coming in and out. There isn't much, there's no reason to really concern. Just have your passport. It's like traveling really anywhere, to be frank. And yeah, everything else kind of works. It wasn't my expectation that I've been told before the invasion in 2022. I was told that I did not want to stay if I wasn't willing to be without electricity, heat, water, bank cards not working, and obviously ATMs not working, all that going out, because they actually expected, at least the US, the CIA expected that Russia would actually on day one take all of that out. And as we see, it took them until is it the fourth winter or technically the fifth winter at this stage to, let's see, with the winter 22, 23, 24, 25, I guess this is, yeah, partly the fourth winter, where they finally managed to take out heating and electricity and water in Kyiv, the capital, but they haven't done it anywhere else. So basically, everything else with those exceptions will work. So we'll be kind of like traveling anywhere else. And we have curfews from midnight to 5 a.m. And it is strict here in Odessa. There's nothing open. And you would have to justify why you're on the street after midnight outside the curfew. If your bus gets in late, it's not a problem. You have your suitcase. There won't be any taxis. Taxi stops don't work in Odessa. However, if you're in Lviv, all that stuff works. There's even restaurants open 24/7. At least, well, there's at least one that I know that's open 24/7. There's actually even a few clubs that are open on the weekends, until curfew is over. So it's a very different situation, a lot more relaxed there. And if you go to Ozhhorod, which is a city in the west of Ukraine, I have a vlog from there. I'll drop it down below in the description when I watch the replay later. There's no curfew at all, but it is quite a small town, and the nightlife is not that exceptional. But it is what it is. There you can go, and there's no curfew. So yeah, always carry your passport in case you're stopped, because it's martial law here. Martial law just means that the authorities have more powers than they would in peacetime, so they can stop you. They don't need probable cause to stop you. As you've seen in America in the last few weeks, it doesn't really look like in the US that some parts of the authorities need currently probable cause to stop you and maybe do something worse to you. Ironically, sounds crazy to say it, but not going to happen in Ukraine. Even though they have martial law for 4 years, never heard of a Western tourist or a tourist or really anyone. I think there was one crazy deranged guy come back from the front and lobbed a grenade somewhere in a meeting once in the west of Ukraine. I think they may have killed someone or they injured someone with it. But other than that, I haven't heard of any of that kind of violence by, people who are in uniform. So martial law basically just means that from our point of view, that they can stop you. They don't need probable cause. So just have your passport. The most that ever happened is they just looked at my passport. And again, it only happened for the first time after 3.5 years. So it's not even that frequent. I have talked, I think, about everything else. Just in summary, it may seem a bit strange because this is the biggest war in Europe since World War II. But if you're in a city far from the front, then life goes on. We do have regular rocket and drone attacks. I've never been in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I have been pretty close. It's not very comfortable. You need to be psychologically prepared for that. I did have a situation where I was about to walk out on the balcony and the Ukrainians shot down some sort of kamikaze drone within 100 meters. So I could see it just when I got to the door. But fortunately, it was far enough away, it didn't do anything. No debris fell on me or anything like that. But I could see the light from it. And I heard it was like super close. Now when I opened the balcony, I waited a few seconds and it was like, okay, that was right there because the smoke was 100 meters away where they'd been shot down. So this can happen, and obviously that's something you need to take into account if you're going to come here. So have a good reason to come to Ukraine, and the main reason is if guys don't have a personal reason, like they have a girlfriend or something here, is because they are trying to get first mover advantage here in Ukraine for investment and living a lifestyle that post-war will probably turn out to be a very good investment of their time and the resources into. And some people want to help Ukraine. Obviously, that's also why they're here. That's the majority of people. They're playing some sort of role. I always encourage people to do that. And in general, I think also the cost of living is a lot less here than just about anywhere else in Europe at the moment. It's kind of like, I think living in Odessa is probably half of Warsaw, for example. So let's say move on and talk about, I've already talked about who's coming. Let me say who's not coming. Because I watched the video from Michael Sartain, who I've actually reacted to. He has I guess we can call it a dating channel. He says he's not doing dating, but he's just clever branding, I think, for him. It's, I guess, more about creating social circle. I actually agree with a lot of the things he says with respect to that. And he has commented geopolitically, and he, unusually for this whole manosphere, you had that situation where a lot of the people he hangs out with throwing Heil Hitler salutes up on a video that moron Gaines, Myron Gaines, and his crew, and obviously, I say obviously, but of course the Tate brothers were there with all that, pretty vile shenanigans going on with Nick Fuentes. But in spite of that, he is pretty, I think, accurate in describing that Russia is not doing well in the war, and basically he doesn't take the normal manosphere position of basically being Putin friendly, or trying to make excuses for Russia. And it kind of surprised me when I watched one of his videos talking about passport bros, and he mentioned Ukraine as a destination for passport bros. I was like, man, in 2026, maybe, I mean, the term was around 2021. I guess that was true because it was a lot cheaper here. It's also still pretty cheap. It's about the same price level as it was in 2021 as we go into 2020, as we're in 2026. And of course, the famous, heavily marketed, beauty of the local women was a big attraction. So there were a lot of single guys who were hanging out here. I was also single for much of the time. And he said that it was also still a passport protest. I think he just had it in his notes, or he didn't really reflect on it. But for sure, there are no passport pros in Ukraine, or there are very few. There is none of the, there's no, there's kind of none of that digital in my crowd because we have a war. So that is something that they're scared of. I think that kind of type he's talking about. And another, passport bro is a very negative term. I've never wanted to be associated with it because it's kind of this very cheap, a lot of it is sex tourism. They're just paying to have sex with women. It's kind of this commercial sex travel. It's kind of sexpatism from what I can see in poorer countries. Well, most sexpatism is in poorer countries, I guess. And a lot of those types, I guess, they kind of hang out in, the only place they hang out in this region from what I can see is really Warsaw, which again doesn't really make much sense because it's not cheap in Warsaw relative. It's maybe 20 or 30% cheaper than in a comparable city in North America or Western Europe, but it's not massively cheaper. And yeah, the girls there are not desperate at all. So yeah, even if they're not doing the pay for play, I don't know why they would go there. I think they all go to hang out with each other more than to meet women. I think that's just an excuse for them all to bond. That's been my hypothesis since many of those guys doing the day game outside the train station in Warsaw causing a public nuisance. They come up to me and they tell me, and they admit they don't meet very many women doing it at all. But they all hang out together. That's what I can say. They do this kind of group activity. Anyways, in short, this is not a passport road destination. That means the sexpats are gone, and basically most tourists are gone in general. So if you come here, you don't have those kind of guys around. It's not the best kind of atmosphere. It also provokes a negative reaction from a lot of women because they just see, oh, foreign guy equals sex tourist equals sexpat, or some kind of low value guy looking for women who can't get, loser back home type. So that kind of stereotype, which is kind of this foreigner fatigue you see in a lot of countries, not obviously common in Ukraine nowadays. So just thought that was kind of funny that he mentioned in the same breath. Do I think if the war ends, it will become a passport broad destination? I think they will come back because it's cheap here. I don't think the women will be desperate, but I think it will be cheap, and it will be cheaper to live here, so they will market it. And they already have the pre-existing marketing, a lot of it from the dodgy kind of mail-order bride industry back in the day, or the letter writing PPL sites. They will maybe pump money back into it. So yeah, definitely those kind of guys are not here en masse like they were. I used to always talk about the hordes of horny foreigners in Arcadia during the summers. They're all gone. So if you go to Arcadia this summer, there will be some foreign guys and some tourists, but not so many. So that is something that I guess you don't find. And yeah, I just thought it was kind of funny. I say in my videos, like, don't come to Ukraine. Obviously, if you support Russia or Putin or the war against Ukrainians, and that's kind of like the ipso facto, right? But there is actually a story where this Italian guy, his name was Rocco, who apparently is a Ukrainian wife, on the bus from, I guess it was in Poland, he was crossing into Ukraine. He started to like verbally abuse the other passengers, started giving actually Heil Hitler salutes, Roman salutes, up and down the bus. Some absolute nutcase and praising Putin. And yeah, he was refused entry and banned for 3 years. So I watched an interview on Ukrainian television with the girl, one girl who was on the bus, and described the situation. He started insulting everyone, calling them morons. And yeah, just kind of insane to think that someone like that, number one, is married to Ukraine, and number two, trying to come to Ukraine, and number three, telling everybody in the bus and insulting them and causing this whole ruckus. So yeah, don't do any of those things, and don't support Russia if you're going to come here. That makes sense to most people, except for a lunatic, very small minority apparently. What else to say about coming here? Yeah, this is part of, I guess, can we still call it collective West, but at least a collective Europe in the sense of geopolitics. So, and I think culturally Ukraine is changing quite a bit. So if you've been here back, say, if you were here 10 years ago, I mean, the culture has changed too much. I'll give you a good example. One of my clients, he sent me a happy Christmas message on January 7th, which is the Orthodox Christmas. Now, Ukraine, and a lot of places in the region, some parts of the region, they celebrate either on both dates, December 25th, as well as January 7th. Obviously, it's mainly in Moscow or Moscow-aligned churches that celebrate it on January 7th, but some people in the Baltic celebrate it there, some people in Belarus, some people in Moldova even. And he sent me a message, and it was kind of odd, like, because I was here, I was like, I did not see any Christmas celebrations on 25th, or on January 7th. I saw lots of them on the 25th of December, lots of kids out. And I wasn't here last Christmas in Ukraine. I think the previous one I might have been here. And yeah, in that 2 years, it's really changed. Like it is not celebrated, even in Odesa, which, you know, is more bilingual with Russian and Ukrainian. Yeah, kind of that's how the culture has shifted. So if you came 10 years ago, I don't think your experience is particularly relevant, but even if you came, like some of these matchmakers that keep talking about what it's like in Ukraine and they haven't been back for 4 years, it seems, I don't think they're really in touch with the reality is. So this is more similar, I would say, to Poland nowadays than it is to Russia. I think just the culture has shifted, and it's been accelerated with this war. It was going that direction anyways, but now it's definitely changed quite a bit. I've already talked a little bit about the visa-free, 90 every 180 days. Also, if you want to stay longer, get a temporary residence permit, get a permanent residency. You can get them through marriage, having a child, set up a business. Help many clients over the years with doing that. Because drop me an email, connor@connorklein.com, if you're interested in that. And especially if you're planning to set up a business here, not just for residency, but actually because you want to have a business in one of the sectors that I mentioned, like agriculture or defense industry or something else, then either schedule a consulting call down below if you want to have my mentorship remotely over the phone. We can jump on a video call together, and if not, just send me an email. Maybe it's something where I just refer you for now to I did have someone who contacted me with a legal problem that they had, so I referred him to a good lawyer for that specialization. So we'll see if that is sorted out in due course. Cost of living I've also commented on. Yeah, it's about half of Warsaw living here. It's a little bit more expensive in Kyiv. There are a lot of now discounts in Kyiv on more up-end upscale properties because, well, they've had this crisis for the last few weeks with electricity, heating, and water. So that's probably, for some people, meant that they want to try and sell it. Maybe they've decided to leave Kyiv, so there's a little more property on the market. In general, even compared to Moldova is in between Polish prices and Ukrainian prices. So it is a bit more expensive than here, but not as expensive as, say, in Warsaw. And the Baltics, again, it's about, if you take a typical city in Western Europe and you compare it with the price level, say, in Warsaw and the Baltics, it's going to be about 30%, 20 to 30% cheaper in Warsaw or in Riga or Vilnius than it would be in the equivalent city, say, in the UK or in France or in Germany. And if you come to Moldova, it's probably going to be about half the price, and it's going to be way less than half the price if you come to Ukraine, because it's about half the price of Warsaw. So you can do the mathematics, and it's probably going to be 60% cheaper. Obviously, if something is imported, it's going to be the same price. But for, if you buy stuff from the supermarket, you go to a restaurant, it's going to be dramatically cheaper. Buy a cocktail. I was looking, but it was very expensive. Harry's Bar in Venice, of course, their Bellinis are like 24 euros. So maybe that's not the best comparison. But yeah, I'll pay at a high-end cocktail bar maybe 6-7 euros for a cocktail in Odesa. Maybe it's a bit more expensive in Kyiv. I'll see when I get back up there, but at the top places. So yeah, I guess I don't know what you pay nowadays in in Western Europe, to be frank. I haven't really partied there for so long. I'm not really so sure, but it's going to be at least double. I would expect, if not triple or quadruple that. Other things I should say. Otherwise, I mean, I go to the gym. I have a pretty good gym. I think for the month, I paid a discount on January because I moved to a new one. But yeah, it's about 20, 25 euros for a gym per month. That's one without a sauna, and I like having a sauna in my gym. So for that, I have to pay probably double. But there's none within a couple hundred meters of my apartment at the moment. Maybe if I stay longer here, I'll upgrade and go to a new one. Yeah, cafes. What else is going on? I think I've covered everything with respect to the price level and the quality of life, outside of the obvious caveats. Business and opportunities, why 2026 matters. Yeah, and this is first mover advantage. I've given my assessment in previous live streams about whether I think the war will come to an end in 2026. I said it's 50-50 where we will see a temporary pause in the fighting, but I think that goes up dramatically in 2027. The main reason is the Russian economy, and that's obviously tied, and it's all connected: material, manpower, and money. The three, they all have an influence on each other. And the Russian economy is just in a lot of trouble. This doesn't mean that Russia is going to collapse completely tomorrow, but they've kind of kicked the can down the road for the last 4 years, and now it's coming home to roost, basically, the problems they've created. If you don't think that fighting the biggest war in Europe since World War II is huge drain your economy, you don't understand anything about economics, because they can do a lot of accounting tricks, whatever, and say whatever they want in public, but if it was so great for their economy, like we're claiming all this growth in the past, that everybody would be fighting wars for economic growth. Of course, it's a complete train wreck, the whole thing. And, building a tank and saying it's worth 2 million and putting it on your balance sheet, and then 6 weeks later it's blown up with the 3 people who were the crew dead, who you spent time training, who, okay, maybe they weren't the most skilled people, maybe they weren't at the peak of their life, because most of the soldiers fighting the war on both sides are my age, or basically my age, they're in their 40s or even older. Still, that's a negative. It's not like building a car, right, where people use it, has a long lifespan, and it's just a basic accounting trick in terms of claiming that they had economic production. Germany, actually interesting, for the early years of World War II, had an amazing balance sheet economic boom, but then they completely collapsed, right, economically as well. But obviously a bit of a different situation than what Russia faces at the moment. At the same time, Russian economy is in a lot of trouble. I watched some of the vlogs from the people who aren't doing the obvious propaganda, which is, because Russia's a police state, pretty much most of them, but you do have some like slip out. Oh, the prices have gone up quite a lot in the last year here. Inflation is not running at 10% there whatsoever. It's obviously for the main staples a lot higher. Also in Ukraine, in hryvnia, is definitely some inflation as well. But in euros, because the exchange rate kind of adjusts, is about the same. So I don't know personally, but I see the prices increase slightly. But in Russia, they've gone up quite a lot. They have high interest rates. They are running, they can't really finance much of a budget deficit because it's hard for them to borrow cheaply. They don't have much of an overall national debt in terms of their GDP, but it's very expensive for them to finance this. They can't really borrow cheaply. They're selling a lot of their gold reserves. What else? They're spending over officially 40% of the budget on the war and internal security, and the oil price is super low, so that's going to have a big impact on their balance sheet. Now, Trump, one thing he's doing positively from Ukraine's point of view in terms of the war is that he started to seize these ships that are part of the Shadow Fleet, again hurting the Russian economy because they're a competitor to the US in terms of oil production, so that's the economic incentive for him to do that. And yeah, just overall, their revenues are going to be going down. They're also crowding out a lot of the other productive sectors of the economy because they send people off to the front by paying them a lot of money. Also another big drain on the budget, on the economy. And they are building drones. I mean, I guess they can sell some of those maybe in the future as high tech as the Ukrainians are doing. But in general, they've just been spending a lot of their economy on something that gets blown up basically in a field in Ukraine with the loss of life. Then they will possibly, I still think that they're probably going to have to go for another mobilization on Russia sometime this year, unless they're just willing to encourage people with huge amounts of money to keep going to die in Ukraine. I don't think it's sustainable. So in terms of the trajectory of the war, it's unlikely. Like these negotiations are complete charade. They're not, there's no bona fide negotiations going on at all. And a security guarantee from Donald Trump at this point isn't worth the paper it's written on. So because it's not going to be credible. And with after his behavior over Greenland and other comments he's made and decisions he's made with respect to NATO and security guarantees there. Plus, the Ukrainians have the memory of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, where they got security assurances, and of course didn't amount to much when Russia invaded starting back in 2014. So I think that it'll probably be to the 2027, but there is a possibility that this year something major will happen with the Russian economy. Black Swan event on either side you can't predict. And also watch out for what happens in Chechnya, the Northern Caucasus, because the son and a kind of anointed heir to taking over, Ramzan Kadyrov's son, Adam Kadyrov, was in a car accident about a week ago. And that's kind of interesting that the heir to the throne, when his father is apparently quite ill, doesn't mean he's going to die tomorrow either, but in fact he was in a major traffic accident, is a bit suspicious. So could see a major conflict breakout in Chechnya if there's a war of succession, and may even turn into a war of secession at a certain point. These are things that would be massive problems for Russia to continue with the war. Other thing is maybe they just decide to stop the war in Ukraine and attack the Baltics. Again, I think that is low probability, at least until mid-2026. We'll see after that. So I think the time to be thinking of coming to Ukraine is probably the summer onwards, in terms of a possibility of getting that first mover advantage without spending years here waiting for it to happen. I'm very optimistic about 2027 from Ukraine's point of view. All right, last topic before I get into the Q&A. It is the one that most of the guys are probably here for. That is dating in Ukraine in 2026 and elsewhere. We can calm down as well. I did review a lot of content in anticipation by other content creators just to get some ideas or see how other people in other parts of the world are talking about dating as a guy, straight guy basically. And I don't get very much, I don't get much value out of a lot of it, but sometimes there are certain points that come up that are interesting. I think the quality of content in YouTube, well, there's basically a huge dearth for coming to this region in general, this region, except for Poland, where I think it's misrepresentative. They describe it as kind of a MAGA bastion to go to because everybody is, conservative. And I think that's true in the countryside in Poland, but it's not true in big cities like Warsaw. It's pretty liberal. So I think they're misleading a lot of their viewers. And these MAGA guys who go there, I just call them MAGA for shorthand. I mean, the more kind of, we'll say the pro-Russian, people who are in a cult of personality around Trump and just believe everything he does is amazing. But mainly the guys are pro-Russian and they hang out in Warsaw. Like, it must be the most negative country towards Russia outside of Ukraine, and maybe just as negative. So yeah, and I ask these guys sometimes when I meet them, because they say something that indicates that they're of that persuasion. How is your dating life going in Poland? And then they start to complain about Polish women, that they're westernized. And I'm like, I didn't really think this was the spot for you, for a long-term relationship, obviously. I think they just go there to hang out with each other and they can't really think of anywhere else to go to in the region. So yeah, so there's huge dearth, I think, of good quality content about the region in terms of lifestyle. I think I'm basically the only channel. I mean, you could say that Johnny FT to a certain extent up in Kyiv still talks about lifestyle, but the rest of it, the rest of the content creators are really only talking about the war here. And I separated it out with the geopolitics channel. And then for the countries like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, there's very little. There's no real good content, I would say, overall. Is there anything? There are some good channels in Poland if you're going to move there that are not the MAGA kind of pro-Russian propagandist types as well. I talked to one of them. I even filmed with him, and I'll have a full Vakas interview with him pretty soon. I guess McLeod is in Bulgaria. At least that gives you some insight what's going on there. I saw a channel in French about Budapest. There's no channel in Moldova. Even Anna Maria, who was in my video in 2022, she left. She went to where did she go? She went to the Netherlands. So there's another girl who had a channel and she left. She went to Luxembourg. And there's one other girl, Yelena, who had a channel, but I don't know where she is. She stopped filming. So no one does anything about Moldova. I make all the videos there, basically. So yeah, I think there's really a dearth of good quality content, especially for a more higher levels lifestyle. There's just kind of backpackers and vloggers who go for a week and make a video, and it's going to give you one perspective, but I don't think it gives you a great perspective. So yeah, that's one problem I see in YouTube. And then the dating advice in general is terrible. Most of it's done by these scammy marketers. They couldn't get, proverbially couldn't get laid in a brothel kind of types, and they just make stuff up. And unfortunately, our audience is even more clueless. That's my general perception. I listen to so much misrepresentation. And then obviously we've got the traditional values, mail order bride types who, in my opinion, misrepresent a lot about Ukraine. Anyway, some of the stuff that I did think that was valuable, I'll give you a synopsis. I watched some of the content from James Tusk, who I did a social experiment video with back in 2019. It's actually in St. Petersburg. And something interesting I thought that he said in one of his videos is like there's very low return on investment for using dating apps and for doing day game, even though he teaches day game. He just says walking around in a shopping mall, which has always been my point. Walking around a shopping mall for bloody 10 hours, pestering girls, not a very productive use of your time. Even if you might meet and get a date or two out of it, you spend 10 hours walking around a shopping mall. Like, work in your business, go to the gym, have a social circle with that time, and you'll be a lot better off, in my opinion. Obviously, if you have approach anxiety, I think that's really the main benefit from this whole day game malarkey, is at least you'll get over your approach anxiety by doing more approaches. I understand that's a big issue for a lot of guys. It's evolution of biology. That's the explanation why men are so nervous about approaching women, because you get rejected, and it kind of indicated when we lived in small tribes that you wouldn't be able to reproduce. At least that's the theory. Whether that's true or not, well, I'm personally a little bit skeptical, but I think it's more conditioning than evolutionary biology. The three, I just thought that was an interesting observation. It kind of aligns with what I say, and some of the one or two other people I think who make sense online when they talk about dating as a single guy, straight guy, especially one who's traveling abroad and living in a different culture. Using dating apps, of course, I understand if you're back home. I'm just trying to think, did any of my clients who ever got married use it? Yes. One did use Tinder, and he did meet his wife on Tinder, and I screened it. He also met a lot of terrible women on Tinder who were going to scam him. But this is in 2019. He's American, came, and yeah, I remember that. But that was the only one. Everyone else met normally in person from socializing, and my client who said he got engaged, he actually met on a language learning app. Yes, I've also met this is like 10 years ago, a girl on a language learning app who actually went out on a proper date with. So that was kind of, they had a mutual, it was online, but they had a mutual interest. Everyone else met him in person. Went clubbing, I'll get to that in a minute, because I had an interesting comment from someone. So the three most common questions I get are about Ukraine in particular. What is the gender ratio between men and women? Is it possible to have a big age gap? And the third thing I put down was about, whether Ukrainian women are as beautiful compared to the alternatives. They're the main three things. And obviously guys make comments about the value system. I always sum it up. There are princess values here, not traditional values. There are princess values. That is way more common. And the main difference culturally is that women are way less financially emancipated in Ukraine than they are, say, in the US or the UK or Ireland or France or Germany. So they expect the man to take the lead more when it comes to courting and to pay for everything, basically. That's basically the way it is. If you go to Poland, it's actually not as clear. I think from what I can see that actually it's 50-50. Women are a lot more financially emancipated there than they are in Ukraine and Belarus. And in the Baltics, I don't think they're actually as financially emancipated as in Poland. So I think it's a lot more similar to here. But they are not really traditional in any other real way. Divorce is super high. It's higher here than it is in Western Europe or North America. There are small families, very low fertility rate in general. It's lower than in Western Europe and North America. It's not like women are virgins on their marriage day here. I'm not saying that they should be. It's not questioning any of those values. It's just pointing out what the reality is. So the way they talk about along these kind of more not very reputable commentators is they describe it as something like Afghanistan in terms of traditional values, when it's part of the West here, right? It's Western values, just a bit more conservative, and women are less financially emancipated. That's the main difference. So if you have that traditional bride fetish, then you're probably going to end up you're more likely to get scammed, because a lot of these, PPL sites, they will have an AI bot talk to you basically and become your perfect girlfriend or potential wife and just tell you all about the traditional values and keep sending money and presents and stuff like that. And a lot of scammer women, they could probably go into ChatGPT these days, but in the past they were actually buying courses, and it's how to manipulate men, and that is one of the main things they do. They talk about masculine and feminine energy, and we're traditional and you got to pay, and they manipulate these guys just paying for stuff, and they turn them into simps. Maybe they're already simps, but so you need to be very careful of that. That's the main difference. Gender ratio, Back in 2022, most single women left, or disproportionate number of single women left Ukraine because men between 18 and 60 couldn't leave and women could. That has reversed quite a bit because now men between 18 and 22 can leave. So it's only men between 23 and 60 that can't leave without permission. It's without permission, and a lot of men left illegally anyways. And a lot of women have actually come back. I've met so many women who lived in Western Europe, even one lived in Bali for 3 years, and they came back to Ukraine, and yeah, they seem to be single. So you have a lot more of gender balance nowadays. I'd say if you went to a bar, and obviously we have curfew, so they close quite early, probably still see more men than women at something like a bar later on. But if you go to a cafe during the day, at least where I go, it's more women than men. So it's hard to say, but it seems to be pretty balanced in terms of gender nowadays. A lot of men, well, if they're AWOL from the army or they're serving the front lines or tragically been killed, then obviously they're obviously not around in that sense. So it's probably pretty much looks even. So you don't have this huge imbalance with way more men than you had in the past. Age gap, for some reason I always get asked this. The thing is that if you are looking for a big age gap, well, it depends about who you're looking for. You're looking for someone who's a top model and 20, or you're looking for someone who's fat and frumpy and hit every branch on the ugly tree on the way down and got almost no perceived value from men for some reason. She's obese and she's young. Well, obviously there are two different categories completely. I would say if you look at the statistically age gap, here it's about 3.3 years in terms of marriage. In terms of the age gap in the US, it was 2.2 years. So yeah, 50% higher. But it's not crazy. It's not like 5 years age gap is the norm. So in general, here, if you look at Ukrainians, age gap is not the norm, a big age gap. However, because of hypergamy, socioeconomics, then it's easier for women, certain types of women, to justify having a bigger age gap because they want to be taken care of. And socioeconomically, it's poor here in Ukraine. It's going to be in Western Europe and North America. So you're more likely to see it with that subsection of women in general. If you're a guy who is over 40, you're not obese, you're good grooming, you're able to talk to women, you have a certain amount of value anyways, right? You have decent style. You don't have to have all these things dialed in perfectly, but you have no obvious big flaws. You have solid finances, charisma, then you can have a 50% age gap. You can be half your age. I don't think that's unrealistic. I always make fun of one matchmaker who came up with a 23% rule. And I was a bit shocked because they said the maximum age gap that they can help a guy with is 23% of his age. So in my case, I'm 47. So that means the absolute youngest that they can match me with is 36. And I'd be like, are you serious? But I understand it's a matchmaker. Like the women who go to matchmaking are normally over 35. And they're going there for a reason because either they're green card girls and they really want to get to America, and that's the way to get there, or they just have low perceived value. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that local men are not interested in them, and there's normally a good reason for that. So it is what it is in terms of that section, but I don't want to talk about that so much in this live stream. 50% rule, 50% club. I have many clients who come on who are older than me in their 50s, and they date women half their age basically. So I think if you're over 40, 50% rule is I think it's realistic. It's also possible in my home country of Ireland. I remember we had a friend who was a lawyer, and her best friend was in her late 20s and dating a guy in her 60s who was American and super rich. And he was older than her parents, and she was Irish. So it's possible everywhere if you have enough perceived value, and certain types of girls are going to go for that. More likely here than it's going to be in Western Europe and North America. And it's easier to achieve, of course, because it's hypergamy and it's the cross-cultural phenomenon of women dating up, aside and up on socioeconomic hierarchies is the definition. So you're going to satisfy that nearly always here in Ukraine, nearly all the time. And then, because of the socioeconomic situation, you just look like a bigger fish in that sense, a bigger catch. So for some women, they're going to be more flexible on the age gap because they see it as just more perceived value. But again, be possible in Ireland as well. To be frank, it'd just be harder, basically, I would say overall. So definitely more doable here. I think in terms of, as I had a discussion with one of my clients, and he was saying, well, it's better to be American than a Ukrainian guy. But if you took out the socioeconomic, like if you took the same guy or the same, we'll say the same finances, that's common here, than someone from America or from Western Europe, then I think the Ukrainian guy would have an advantage. Just like most women, I think it was even when the matchmakers had a stat, but only 15% of Ukrainian women were even open to dating a foreigner back in the day. So yeah, most people want to basically marry people from their own culture nearly everywhere, not 100%, but nearly everybody, everywhere. So I wouldn't say that's the case. I think if you don't, especially if you don't speak the local language, then yeah, ceteris paribus, they're probably going to take the local guy unless they want to leave and go. I mean, some girls want to leave, but they could have left in the last 4 years. So I don't think there are that many of them left. Anyways, let me move on because I will get to your Q&A. I did say that today would be a long type of live stream. Also look to what's working on YouTube. Yeah, most of the dating advice channels about this region are in terminal decline, but just this whole region is not popular in general. The only one that's kind of getting some views always has, yeah, they have a thumbnail similar to what I have today. That's why I have a blonde Ukrainian girl on. It's obvious. But if you want to meet, you know, someone who's under 30, model level beauty, blonde or brunette or whatever, definitely going to meet them, or almost impossible to meet them with online dating. You really got to meet them in real life in general. That's my piece of advice. That means coming, spending a good amount of time, creating a social circle. If you are committed long-term, like my client who just got engaged, learn the local language. Here it's going to be Ukrainian nowadays. In Moldova, probably going to be Romanian. It's probably going to be more useful. If you're traveling between different countries, maybe it still makes sense to learn Russian, like you're going to, I don't know, to Riga, to Chisinau. You can still speak in Russian, and it's bilingual here in southern and eastern Ukraine. But in general, learn the local language, huge advantage. And it's possible without it. I never said that you have to, but it's going to be an advantage. Even if the girl wants to speak to me in English, I can just speak in English, but I'll have the option, the flexibility, right? It gets you out of the tourist category straight away, and it just makes it easier, because when you're learning the language, you also learn a lot about the culture. So it's definitely very valuable. And yeah, what else? Yeah, I wanted to comment on, Ukrainians are not that blonde, by the way, in general. It's like 45% of Ukrainians are blonde, technically, and that seems to be a very high percentage when I look it up. I think it's also dirty blonde. And here in Odesa, it's definitely lower than that. If you want blondes, then Estonia, Latvia, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, that's where you need to go. Maybe even less than Denmark. I think it's really Finland, Sweden, Estonia, and Latvia. One observation, just to mount up, where I will comment about the matchmakers, and this is not to be pejorative. Like, I've been doing this channel with this theme since 2018. I did a video with Yelena back in the day. If you're interested in watching all my content about matchmaking, I have a playlist down below in the description, and you can go watch those videos if you're interested in that topic in more depth, because I interviewed several of them. And I also appeared on our channel, CQMI Rencontre, in French with Antoine. I actually like watching his live streams because he talks about geopolitics a little bit, talks about psychology a little bit. So it's just a lot more interesting than the rest of them, which are just pure marketing, in my opinion. But they probably make more money because they just do the pure market, but it's not as interesting. But like, we've been doing this, like I started this channel with this theme in 2018. And most of them are around the same time. It's now 2026. So everybody is like 7 to 8 years older. And as a result, like, I'm 47, and everybody else who's in that kind of interesting, it was in that industry, who's still around, because most of them, a lot of them just left with the invasion, they just left the industry. They're all at least pushing 40, if not 50 and 60. So it's become, yeah, just an industry, or they're giving advice about dating basically in your 40s. As you know, the women are probably in their 40s largely, and yeah, the guys are probably 50s and 60s. When I did an interview, another channel, it's called, what is Giovanni's channel name? I gave an interview to another channel that was about dating. It's like high level integrity skills. And he had this perception it was just for boomer white men. Like, he was really thinking 60-year-old men, that's the whole market, and they're there to meet women presumably in their 40s and 50s. And I was a bit surprised, but then I thought about it. Yeah, actually everyone's gotten kind of 10 years older almost. So they kind of have gone from being like, you know, maybe even 30 at the time, but now they're in the 40s, and most of them are talking they're in the 50s and 60s. Just when I looked through them all, I was thinking, I was listening to some of the matchmakers talk about their female clients, and they were saying it's always women, late 30s, 40s. Makes sense. I'm not saying that it's bad. Obviously, if you're looking for a woman in her late 30s or 40s, maybe you already have kids from a previous relationship and you don't want more, which is the most common query I get for that age demographic, then it makes sense to go there. Maybe I'm saying it makes sense automatically. It might be more interesting, but under that, yeah, they can't relate. And also, there's a big generational gap every like. It's not even a generation. It's like every 10 years in Ukraine. Like a woman who's 40 doesn't have much in common with a woman who's 30, I think, and definitely not. And then the woman who's 30 doesn't have much in common with a woman who's 20. Just culturally, because Ukraine has moved on so much, and I think the whole region. Same if you're Moldovan, same if you're Polish. What we would receive is one generational jump. It's like every 10 years, and I see that in the style as well. Yeah, very much so. It's more noticeable than you see it in Western Europe or North America. So just be aware of that. That unless you're really interested in that age demographic, I don't think that their advice makes any sense, and especially if they haven't been in Ukraine. But to each their own. I just thought that was an observation I had because I did review a lot of content. I did the hard yards so you don't have to. Another query I got was about the Trump administration pausing all visa issuances to immigrant applicants from many countries that are not directly in the region that I deal with, but kind of close enough. There's like a lot of countries on the list, so if you have more general interests, they will not issue an immigrant visa. Now that is different to the K1 process for Americans, which is a fiancé visa. That's a non-immigrant visa because then you have to convert it once you're in the US. So my understanding, and I'm a former lawyer, is that that's still fine. You can do the K1, but the Trump administration isn't big on immigrants. Ironically, Donald Trump's wife is an immigrant from this broader region, from Slovenia. But okay, maybe it gives you a pass if you have a hot Central or Eastern European wife or fiance. I don't know, but it will affect you. For example, if you have a wife already, you got married, and then you decide to move back to the States, getting the green card and stuff. One of my friends did it recently. He's a Georgian wife. Well, it's actually a few years ago at this stage, and but yeah, he had been in the intelligence community, so I think he got it done pretty quickly. He had a kind of priority. But for my region, the only two countries that were there were Moldova and Kazakhstan. And about half of Moldovans anyways have an EU passport. They have either Romanian, Bulgarian citizenship, so very likely to make a difference with a Moldovan. For Kazakhstanis, it could be something to think about. If you're American, you move there, you live outside the US, and you're with your wife for several years, and she's not a citizen, and then you decide you want to move back to the States, so you're already married, so it's not going to be a fiancé visa. Maybe something to be aware of. Maybe you want to just do the fiancé visa straight away and move to the US, do the K1, get the green card, sort it out. Many years. Hopefully she doesn't leave you when she has the green card. That's always been my concern about the green card girls, right? These guys who move them to the West. I think it's a bad idea in general. Just lifestyle, cost of living is going to be higher, and the chances that you're also going to be a more competitive dating market. So even if she went with good intentions, after she has the green card, you kind of become superfluous to requirements unless you're kind of on the same level when you get back there. That's my piece of advice. I did have a client who told me that he was hanging out in Canada with a group of Canadian men who were married to women from Russia, from Ukraine, from Poland, from Central and Eastern Europe, basically. And it was like in the 2000s, right? So it's 20 years ago. And he said that 80% of the women, they broke up with the guy once they had residency or citizenship, right? So he said none of them broke up with the men beforehand. I had another client who told me that he had a friend who did the whole marriage thing twice, once with a Russian, once with a Ukrainian. Eventually, the third marriage, it was like a woman in the US. I think she might have been from somewhere else, but he married in the US, none of this green card stuff. But his quote to me that I think is legendary from his friend said that the best sex was in the 3 months before she got the green card. So always be cognizant of these things when people have an incentive to keep you happy in general. So some of the other countries that were on the list, Russia is there, Belarus is there, Georgia is there. I'm seeing Kosovo, Kyrgyzstan, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Uzbekistan, Albania, Armenia. So just something to bear in mind. You can still do the K1, but if you do get married and you want to move back to the States with your spouse in the future, that might become a problem. That's the main issue I saw for it. But for guys who come with me, that would only really affect Kazakhstan, maybe Moldova. But again, I don't really encourage guys to move back. Many of my clients have, and no one's gotten divorced yet as far as I know. But yeah, just be aware of that. Another interesting tidbit, there's a guy called Charles Zimmerman. He's arrested in Sochi in Russia. He met a woman online and decided, from Kazan apparently, which is in Tatarstan, Russia, decided on his yacht to go to Sochi because he was in the region. And I'm laughing, but it is what it is. You should not go to, I don't obviously encourage people to go to Russia. So a little bit of schadenfreude, I'll admit it. But he had a weapon on board, and he wasn't allowed to come into Russia with it. So he got 5 years in prison. So I know very few people are going to be that dumb to go to Russia with a weapon, but he was on a yacht, and apparently, I guess it wasn't a big problem in the rest of the places he went to, but he's sitting in a Russian prison. But there are many other Americans who end up in a Russian prison. So yeah, at your own risk going to Russia. Is there anything else I wanted to say before I give a summary? And then I go to your Q&A. Very long, I know, but getting it out of the way. Manosphere, I've already commented on that ridiculous scene from the red pillars and some of the black pillars. If you don't understand what those are, red pill, there's certain points that I agree with, but basically it's a lot of misogyny towards women in that kind of group. And then you got the black pillars who think that attraction is all about looks. Well, I'm no oil painting myself, so I obviously, I'm not the ugliest guy in the obviously on the planet, but you know, I don't get all the hotties from just looks alone, so that's obviously for me just ridiculous. But they're all hanging out together. They're all very politically active in this extreme far right neo-Nazi kind of, which is weird. Some of them are mixed race or black, like the Tates are mixed race, but they hang around with this crowd. Makes no sense to me. I don't get this new far right thing where a lot of the people are exactly the people that the Nazis would have discriminated against, but they think it's shining how Hitler is pretty cool. If you follow those people and you think you're getting good dating advice, you're sorry, you're mistaken. Or vice, in my opinion, vice and much else. I just thought it was kind of interesting to see, since I've reacted to many of them, like the Tates and Myron Gaines over the years. See them, the degeneracy. Descent to lower depths. Passport bros, huge scandal. I have vehemently opposed being put in that bracket in the past. There's even some woke content creators who use my image as a passport bro, and I was like, oh, I am definitely not a passport bro. Of all the things to label me as. Anyways, there is a huge, one of them, who's one of the main content creators in that group that was using the term, black men mainly. He's been arrested in Brazil, alleged of trafficking of children. And a lot of the channels of those passport bros have been deleted. At least they've disappeared off YouTube. So YouTube is clamping down on them. It is not a good term in general. And my main opposition to it was that I saw, first it was guys who seemed very low level and going places just because they're cheap, seemed quite misogynist as well. And on top of it, there was a lot of guys, promoting to pay for sex as they travel. So just basically sex towards sex pat, which is something I don't want to be associated with. So always been negative towards the term. And that's why I made videos saying that these places I go to are not for passport bros, which is true, in spite of what Michael Sartain said in his video. And now that it's been associated with this, even more reasons to well clear. And I suspect there are other people involved in that. I had a little bit of a read what the trafficking scandal is about. And it's pretty disgusting what they were doing. But I don't want to get into it in this. Maybe YouTube will have an issue with the monetization afterwards if I start talking about the details. So we'll just leave that out. But you're free to go and read about it. Just Google it. It's pretty horrific. And I already commented on the other content creator. What conversation about Southeast Asia. I mean, he just said there are a lot of European women traveling. That's not just Asians. I have nothing against going to Southeast Asia. It just wasn't for me. And I think for the long term, he also didn't really have a place that he was staying long term. So I was like, what's the plan? He was the same age as me. I was like, what's the plan when you get in the 50s? You're not looking to get married, it seems. You don't settle in one place. Like, you're going to keep doing this until you're 65? Well, if you want to do that, that's fine. But I don't think that's realistic. Or maybe it's realistic, you could do it, but I don't think it's going to be rewarding as a life experience if you're still doing that. Other things, AI is improving, obviously. Unfortunately, it's also improving with, I guess, the scams online with chat, PPL sites, so pay per letter sites. My main rule, if you ask me about a dating site, my first question is going to be, are you paying for communication? If you're paying for communication and you watch my content, there's something wrong with you. You have an addiction problem, because I've said it in like hundreds of videos. If you pay for communication, then the incentives of the company are not aligned with your incentives. Actually, the same goes for dating apps, right? If you meet someone, anyways, even via a dating app, the first person, imagine you just swiped for free the first time and you met the love of your life. They wouldn't make any money. They need you to be paying, right? And on a PPL site, if you're paying for communication, they need you to be communicating. not meeting the woman, having a relationship, right? So I think the AI will lead into all of that. You'll be able, I get advertisements to have an AI avatar girlfriend all the time. I don't know. I guess it's going to be, a certain part of society is going to pay to have a virtual girlfriend and probably a sex robot at some point. Pretty sad, but I think that's something we'll see. I think the younger generation aren't as used to, they spend so much time on their screens. They're not as, they weren't forced to be like Generation X and have to talk to people and socialize and get rejected. I think that's going to be a problem for that generation. It probably for older, it's probably even better. My German ex said that she made a comment like, you must have so little competition for the young generation for the hottie 25-year-olds because she thinks they're terrible. They have no, but anyways, that was just her opinion. It's kind of funny. Not hating on younger people, but yeah, I think the fact that they also drink a lot of alcohol, which is interesting. I don't know if that obviously has positives. You're not going to get liver failure as easily. I'm just hoping that medicine catches up to help my liver. Yes, the last one I want to talk to. I think it's the last thing before I do my summary. I think it was an important one because someone filled out my application form down below in the description for my in-person immersion, right? So you get my mentorship. We go to the city up to a week together, and you get my encyclopedic knowledge with you and all my skills, having coached lots of guys, having been here, been on probably thousands of dates with women for the region. Some went really well, some, obviously I learned from the ones that went wrong as well. And he wrote that he wrote in the application form that he doesn't want to go to clubs because he's looking for a wife. And I think he wrote, I don't know if that's direct quote, but not a fling. So that's a limiting belief. My own parents met in a pub, right? So, okay, that's something maybe very Irish, but if you have a preconceived notion that you can't meet a woman for a long-term relationship in a bar or club, that tells me more about you than about bars and clubs, right? So you must have very little success in that environment. Not saying you have to meet in a bar or club, or you need to go to a bar or club, or you need to drink alcohol necessarily, but you need to socialize, right? Relying on apps and stuff like that. The masses may meet on apps nowadays in the US. They say it's 51% of relation, but I think the top 15%, they're meeting in person, or maybe through Instagram a bit. But mainly they meet in person. Not everybody, but mainly. So yeah, if you want to meet the creme de creme, very likely it's going to be online, and you need to give yourself as many avenues as possible. And just if you go out to a social event, and normally we're talking about bars and clubs, going to restaurants, then people are more socially open, right? There's more likely to be single people there, first of all, and they're more open to being approached, to getting conversation and getting into a relationship than otherwise. And because alcohol, people are more likely as well, I guess. So on average, two of my clients, because I wrote it down, are married to women that they met clubbing. One just had a child earlier this year with a Belarusian model that he met, went to the legendary ayahuasca back in the day. Unfortunately, with the protests in 2020 and the clampdown, the owners had to leave, and it's a shadow of its former self in Minsk. But yeah, he met his wife, Belarusian model. They just had a child together. It's also, you see the time period, because we went on that trip in January 2019. So now, 2025, he had his first child, met in a club. So you're eliminating that avenue. So just think, it's something here every once in a while. You don't meet good girls in clubs. I even made a video. Maybe I'll put it down in the description if I see it on the replay later. But you meet lots of different people, and you're not willing to be social. There's probably some issue there. That's what I just think. It's a bit like there's another dating coach who's based in Ireland. He's German, David Messan, I think is how you pronounce his name. And I like some of his content. I don't think he's bad or anything, but he obviously had some experience with dating at work or something, because he has never dated a woman at work. He says that, I understand for guys who don't have much experience, someone saying it online as an authority very assertively is just convincing. But man, that's terrible advice, because you're closing off a huge avenue to meet women. Maybe people don't want to admit it, but personally, I'll be open. I have never worked anywhere where I didn't have a relationship at work, romantic relationship, ever. I'm thinking even the 3-month internships I did, like that's mad, because it's a familiar environment versus an unfamiliar environment. And for men, if you look at, there's also a video down below that I have. Yeah, I see the comment retort, don't poop where you eat. Yes, of course, you need to be careful with the managing your coworkers and your boss if you have a relationship at work, and it can be negative. Yeah, and I had those experiences where, of course, people were jealous if you're dating the hottie at work, whatever, right? And it can cause problems. It can also raise your status when people know that you that you're dating the hottie at work as well, right? Because men, like it or loathe it, the reality is that dating an attractive woman gives you higher status as a man. Makes some guys jealous because they want what you have, for sure. So you need to be able to manage these things, for sure. Probably not let other people work find out is the best way, to be frank. But you're there. I used to work as a lawyer. We were in the office all the time. It's the easiest way to meet someone and start relationships at work. And there were lots of attractive women where I worked most of the time. So I also worked at the European Commission. It's a huge organization. It doesn't have to be your direct colleague. So many people in that environment, if they didn't meet in university, they meet at work. So just this kind of definitive, never did meet did anyone at work, you're closing off a huge avenue. Just being frank about it. Of course, if you work somewhere where there aren't women you're interested in, then don't date at work, because it's unlikely you're going to meet someone that is going to be the ideal match, and then you're going to have the downsides. But again, same with going out and socializing, especially if you want to meet the best women. It doesn't mean when we say bars and clubs, it could also be at a different event. But guess what? If you think you're going to meet an introverted bookworm of type of girl who doesn't go out, doesn't drink alcohol, where are you going to meet that girl? You're not going to meet them. And then on dating apps, it's very hard, right? So they normally meet friends of friends. And probably, like if you go to a club, what's very common here is that girls go out and celebrate a birthday together at the club. Not all of them are going to be single, but they're going to go out to the club and they're probably going to have a big table. Perfect opportunity. You meet lots of girls who don't normally even go out at those kind of event tables at clubs. Or you go to a nice cocktail bar. Also got a lot of great women. Also go there. You can go to events. Also what I like to do with clients, event where we're going to have obvious value. For example, perfect. Meet women are probably going to be a good match there as well. So yeah, just don't eliminate through a mindset problem from my point of view a certain type of place. If you really don't like socializing, well, I guess therein lies the problem, right? That's probably why he said that. But it seemed like he was indicating he met women that he was just sleeping with, maybe that, or hugging with, that he wasn't interested in bars and clubs. That could be, like I react to that that young man. I was supposed to do a debate with him. What's his name again? Sam Wheatley, who has Wheat Waffles, this Black Pill channel. And yeah, he said, like, he described English bars and clubs, and they sound horrific, but like, don't go to the crap ones, obviously. He was having no success there, yeah, because he's clueless. He has no idea what he's doing, and he has low perceived value. So in general, so just go to the right ones, and that's where your Irish Insider comes in if you want to go to them in this region, right? Or you can buy my guidebooks. You'll at least get an overview there without having me there with you. So that's what I'll say on that. And you don't need to drink alcohol. Like, some of my clients don't drink alcohol at all when we go to the clubs and bars, right? So I do like drinking alcohol myself. So let's see. In summary, before I go finally to your questions, because it's been one of the longest live streams I think I've done in a while. Yeah, I think just reminded from Paul, who got engaged, is he said I'd be the local celebrity. I think he gave me that line even, or we discussed it in one conversation when we were in Almaty in Kazakhstan. Or maybe it was when Riga. Yeah, it was in Riga. Because we're hanging out at a certain part of the city. And yeah, really cool people hanging out at one or two different locations. And of course, they got to know us. They were mainly Russian speaking, maybe 75%. So the fact that we both spoke Russian as well, which was great. It made us kind of fit into that environment more. And yeah, be a local celebrity is going to raise your perceived value. Can be, yeah, obviously easier to do with a mentor. It can be me, or you can try and do it yourself or someone else. Maybe you have a local friend who can get you in the right social circles. You need to, best thing, be providing value in the local society, whether it's here in Ukraine or in the alternatives. Always better. Men were judged to a reasonable extent about the value that we provide to society, right? So if socioeconomic status is important, we value women a lot less than that. We don't value to zero, but it's a lot less than what we value fertility and youth more, for example, looks. Social circles, so important. It's kind of everything can be described as cheat code, but it just makes it so much easier. You don't have to, you're just seen as so much higher value if you have a high value social circle. That normally takes time, or you just have an in, right? Again, why I advertise myself as the insider. Status, obviously we talk about socioeconomic status, which is that in wealth, hypergamy, your looks, your personal style and grooming. If you're interested in me helping with that, that would tailor you to be attractive to, very beautiful women under 30, let's say, in this region, then write me a message, connor@connorcline.com, we discuss it. And something I considered doing before with another client. Same with your Instagram is also something I help my clients with. In the in-person experience, I help my clients with this over time. It's not something that's going to be something you can achieve straight away. Obviously, learn the local language. It's a big investment, but if you're going to stay somewhere for a long time, you're going to get a return on that investment. But it is a lot of work. I know that's why most guys don't want to do it. But as Paul said, game changer for him, because communication skills at the end of the day are the biggest factor in your perceived value. A lot of guys are nervous, so maybe you want to. That's something I can observe. But I don't normally take on clients who are actually that nervous. Just one or two were, and then they behave so differently when we put a beautiful woman in front of them than when they're talking to guys. So you need to have someone probably help you a little bit with that. And yeah, I don't advertise the alternatives too much, but some things can work to a certain extent. What else do I want to say before I get to the question? Yeah, foreigner factor isn't very high in this region, except for Ukraine now with the war, because they're just they don't have foreigner fatigue because they have other types of fatigue from the war, but not foreigner fatigue because there's just so few foreign guys in particular coming here. Kazakhstan as well, there's definitely some foreigner factor. It's just not a place that's traveled to so much. But again, it's 80, because I said in other videos, 85% Asian, 15% European. So if you're not into Asian women, then probably not going to be the spot for you. But if you are open to that, then it's a great place. I love Almaty. I think it's an amazing city, so beautiful there. Got the mountains. If I presume I'm going to get back for ski season, I'm going to have to go and pick up my skis, but you can ski 45 minutes from Almaty. It's an amazing place. One of my favorite places to go to. I haven't been there enough. And yeah, the last point is just a general point. I see a lot of services, I should have said earlier, that are advertised, and it's also what I help you with, right? So let's put it in this context. Like, I can help you with your Instagram because you want to be able to display your value there. I don't encourage what I call catfishing women. Like women, the term catfishing, they adjust their photos and they take off 5 kgs in appearance and they take it with the best angles. Then the one girl shows up and she looks an 8 in the photos in terms of looks out of 10, and she shows up and she's a 4, right? So that's called catfishing, right? Because the expectation did not meet the person who showed up, right? Men, we can kind of do the same thing, which is that we can display our value and misrepresent it on them. So could be posing by car. I think that's try hard and it doesn't work, but just for argument's sake, you're trying to pretend you're wealthy. You're trying to pretend you hang up, which I see doing a lot. They take all these high-end photos and the guy looks like a rock star. Actually, James Tuss said this in one of his videos, which was interesting. He said that he had a client that had done even AI photos, because apparently on the apps and on Instagram, you can put the AI photos that doesn't recognize you yet and kick them off. It may do that in the future, that's what he said. But yeah, that one of his clients, he had amazing, a rock star, dating profile, Instagram. And then all the girls that were showing up in the dates, never getting even a second date, not getting any intimacy. And James' conclusion was that, yeah, he didn't call it catfishing. I'm calling it catfishing. He's catfishing the girls, right? The girl shows up and she doesn't look like in the photos. The guy shows up and he doesn't look like in the photos, not just in terms of his looks, but also the socioeconomic status that he's giving off. And probably there's an amount of confidence and communication, because most people are confident. I mean, it goes hand in hand that you're good at communicating. It's part of confidence, is being able to communicate. And that guy, that the person that she thought she was meeting from the profile was not the person who showed up. So I always tell my clients, you don't want to face up it too much, right? It should be very, very faint. It should move you half a point out of 10. You don't want to misrepresent your lifestyle. If you're not that kind of guy, don't put it on Instagram. Even though you get more matches, maybe more women will be interested in you. The problem is afterwards, when you start interacting with them, you're not going to be able to pull it off nearly all of the time. Of course, it's like with the girl who catfishes the guy. Sometimes she might get to hook up because the guy basically says, oh, I'm already on the date, I got to pay for it, whatever. And maybe, there's still, it's like a Hail Mary, right? I think a Hail Mary's in American football, they work out, 12% of the time? That's the statistical probability, probably. It's probably analogous to around 10%. So what would be a more effective use of your time is a more genuine. Obviously, it's like a CV. You don't want to misrepresent it that you're not the person who you can't do the job. But at the same time, you want to put your best foot forward and, it's part of communication, right? But you don't want to misrepresent your life, because then you're going to screen and filter in. Girls are going to be better matches in general, going to be more interested in you, right? So you're not going to waste your time at dates, because as a guy, you're going to be paying for them in terms of your time and in terms of the bill as well. So you want to avoid doing that, because I see a lot of the services, they're going to do an AI photo profile for you, make you look way higher level than you are. The problem is even if we do a makeover with like the clothes, style, everything, you're not immediately going to be that person that we can turn you into either virtually or in person just by, I saw other people doing the, going shopping. I did it with a client as well. Mariana brought out one of my clients in 2019, bought him new clothes. But I noticed with him, he looked way better, but still he didn't have the confidence and the charisma of the guy who looked that good in the beginning. Now he could have developed it over time. So that's just another thing. Be careful of thinking that you're going to do it's going to be a game changer if you do the profile or you do a makeover. At the end of the day, looks are only a small part of the equation and how women perceive our value, maybe 10%. At the end of the day, you just want to be over the threshold, basically. And that's in terms of grooming, in terms of height. Some women don't want to date guys who are shorter than them, and if you're very short, that's a disadvantage. Basically find girls who are your height or shorter. Just go to a country where they're more common. So that could be, probably don't go to Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Probably go to Moldova or here, or go to Kazakhstan. It's going to be better for you if you're shorter. So yeah, just in general, be aware of that. And then in terms of just a very short synopsis of the alternatives in the region I go to, I would say Poland. If you want the big city, go to Warsaw. It's the biggest city in the region. It has lots of Ukrainians and Belarusians there. I think it's all super cool to go to their different events and their bars and their clubs. It's very cool. I think Polish culture is very hard to break into, especially if you don't speak Polish, unless you are very obviously high value. Most people are not going to be interested in you guys or girls. You obviously want to be developing the social circle and have cool guys, like-minded guys to hang out with. That's what, I don't really know why there's all this, Polish mania. It's actually disappeared in the last 3 months, a lot, maybe 6 months. It's suddenly gone very negative towards Poland for some reason, but still the one that's promoted the most. I think it's really about the fact it's just a big city. I think that's the main advantage. It's not as affordable, like the prices are higher, so then you're going to be vis-a-vis the other cities that are options in the region. Baltic states, you're not going to have the, there are very few passport pros in the region anyways, but you don't have so many digital nomads going there. You don't have sex tourism or something, or romance tourism, we'll call it, guys going there to hit on girls so much. But they're smaller cities. The weather is terrible in winter, well, basically everywhere in the region. What else to say about it? But if you like tall, the leggy blondes, that is the best place in the world. I think as a single guy, I would go to Riga, number one, as a city in the region. I just think it's the best in terms of just cool, sophisticated, educated, beautiful women. It's the types I generally go for. Definitely the model looks tall. It's got the most models per capita in the world. It's going to be in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. And if you're open to Asians, Kazakhstan's the best place to go to. If you want the Ukraine experience without the war, then go to Chisinau in Moldova, because it's very similar in culture to here, but obviously you don't have a hot war. And if you're willing to come to Ukraine, I'm basically the best person to advise you on that. So down below you have the guidebooks, you have consulting. You're going to hop on a consulting call with me and just have a remote call like we're doing here, I guess, but you'll be able to ask me your private personal questions, and we'll develop a strategy for you coming to spend some time in Ukraine or somewhere else in the region. And if you want my personal mentorship in person and have an unforgettable week with me, as I said, the trip that I did in Almaty, it was one of the best 3, I think, of all time. I think that the other 2, the one I put in the top 3, were back in 2019 in Minsk in Belarus. Fortunately, best of Belarus already left. That was at least on this live stream earlier, leaving questions. I'll get to them shortly. Was based there. He's left also recently. So the Anfisa, there's another guy who's training in Belarus. I don't remember his name, but he also seems to have left. There isn't much going on there. It's tragic what happened to Belarus in the interim, but hopefully one day things will improve there and be possible to go back in better days. I will live through the golden age for definitely nightlife and being a single guy in Minsk back in 2018 and 2019. So the alternatives for here, again, if you're going to come to Ukraine, I'm your guy. We can do the in-person immersion, or in one of the other cities that I mentioned, Almaty and Astana in Kazakhstan, Chisinau, Moldova, Warsaw in Poland. I should be going back with a client in the spring there. Riga, Tallinn, and Vilnius in the 3 Baltic states. Apply down below. And the words of Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. He actually said that in what's the term in the word in English? Exacerbation? No. I forgot the word in English. But he said that out of frustration because people kept telling him to shoot. And because I watched a interview with him about where the term came from. That Wayne Gretzky was a very famous Canadian ice hockey player, and it's exasperation. Yeah, I forgot the word in English. God, speaking so much Ukrainian nowadays. And yeah, people kept telling him to shoot, but he actually wanted to pass because he thought it would be better for the team. And then, in kind of as a retort, he said, "Yeah, I know, I miss 100% of the shots I don't take," and that stuck. But kind of got it got misinterpreted a little bit. So he actually wasn't safe to take all the shots. But anyways, apply down below. There is a little bit of a bonus, even if I don't think it's a good fit for us to work together. So you might as well just fill out the application form. And it's just a little bit of your time, and it could be you with me very soon in a city, living an unforgettable week with me as your private mentor in this region very soon. Anyways, let me get to the questions. I have spoken for the longest, I think, on a live stream, 2 hours as a presentation. But anyways, for you that are still here and have listened to this or watching in replay, I will now come to the Q&A. Are 90% of your clients middle-aged or wide age range? I have a wide age range. I have had clients as young as 23, definitely an exception. And we had a fantastic time. We went to Warsaw, Poland. We actually met lots of Ukrainians. And yeah, that was pretty cool. Most of my clients now, they're closer to my age. So I would say 40 and up. So I guess we're middle-aged, yeah. But I had, yeah, my youngest client was 23, another client was 28, another client, you know, lots of clients who were in the 30s. So I wouldn't say that, it doesn't really matter. As long as I have more reservations about taking someone who's too young, who just isn't mature enough, I guess, but this guy was. And maybe guys who are older, especially if they don't want to socialize. Yeah, that, I mean, we would miss out a lot on the in-person experience. However, if it's coming to Ukraine, that's a little bit different because there isn't so much nightlife here. A lot of guys just want my advice because it's not just about going out and partying. It's also going to be looking at real estate here. I used to be a lawyer. I lived in this region for 10 years. So I'm your mentor for everything to do with the region and understanding the law, having the experience of traveling here. You don't have to be billing no mates and come on your own or come with a group that isn't so cool. You're going to go and have that access here with local social circles and understand the country and get my, you know, insights into everything. So a lot of my clients, yeah, of course, the dating was a large part of why they were interested because they're single guys. But half the time they were asking me questions about geopolitics or the law or what I think politically. And they were thinking of buying businesses, investing in real estate and, yeah, getting the right connections. So you can also be older. You could be over 55. I have 2 clients who are in their 60s. And, yeah, I mean, one of them, we party as well. We have legendary time because but he's an exception, right, at his age. But yeah, most of the clients are probably 35 to 50, we'll say. All right, next, stay safe. Thank you, Drummer Chicago. Solid Nate says, so Nate, curious in Europe, is cash highly used? I was planning a trip to Europe and wasn't sure if a credit card would cut it. I think nowadays you don't need cash very much. Maybe I hear in Germany you still need cash. I'm not sure if that's true. I haven't been in Deutschland for so long, but I would say here in Ukraine, when would you need cash? Is there anything? I can even pay for the toilet at the bus station with my card. Almost everywhere. I think once or twice I need a cash, so I carry a small amount of cash for that if I'm traveling. I don't think there's anything else I actually need cash for. I think even for admission to clubs now, they just take card everywhere. Sometimes there was a situation where I think in Warsaw they wanted to pay in cash or you had to pay with this bleak system. It was a bit annoying. But that was like for bars that weren't very high level, to be frank. I went with one of my friends once. I mean, it was more a student bar. That was the thing. I wouldn't say, you know, it's not the top end place. So I think you can use card basically everywhere. Have some danger money as cash in case your cards get stolen. So at least you have some cash, you know. Or maybe you have some issue where the bank blocks your cards. So always have a small amount of danger in money. $500, you know, it should be fine. Of course, you can leave tips in cash if you want. Maybe that's the thing we only really use cash for nowadays. But even there, I put most of the tips even on the card. Niall asks me, what do you think about Paraguay? It seems that it's the current go-to location. Yeah, I've been there. Not recently, but I have been to Paraguay. I would not be interested personally in moving there, even with the current situation. Okay, we got the small war risk. They're the country that was involved in several wars in the past. And if suddenly borders are all up for debate in the world, then it's not the highest risk place. Africa is going to be a disaster. Middle East, disaster. Southeast Asia probably going to be even more problematic as well from what I can see. But there will almost certainly be conflict in Latin America in that situation. Would it affect Paraguay? Possibly. I also watched a bit of content about Paraguay. There's one guy saying that it's great for dating. He's off his rocker, or he's just a super low standard. Yeah, he had a very weird video. It's like, yeah, I don't think it's worth. I think if you're a single guy, I don't see why you would go to Paraguay compared to the alternatives. It's quite, yeah, I think it'll be hard. It's a bit hard if you don't speak Spanish, first of all, and kind of neutral if you're an outsider from what I could see. I speak Spanish. I was there. I mean, I just didn't find Paraguayan women very attractive, to be very blunt about it. So it was like, why would someone recommend dating there? I think it's attractive from a tax point of view. You can kind of be resident and not spend so many days, and the taxes are low. That's kind of what I understood is the big attraction. But it seems a lot of guys are actually moving there. I don't think there's very much to do. Yeah, Sunsun doesn't seem a very exciting city. You're not near the coast. I also went to, I was in Ciudad del Este. Apparently a lot of women who work in the retail there are some most attractive in Paraguay because they're selling stuff. But yeah, it wasn't for me. I don't see why anyone will go there. Maybe you will really want to live in Latin America, prove your Spanish. You don't want an exciting place. You want something that's pretty boring. I think it's different. Like if you told me if you're in a couple, I still don't see why it'd be that exciting to be based in Paraguay. I'd much rather live in Brazil. I love Brazil. So maybe that's just my preference. Greetings from Sweden. Okay. Hey, Roy, it's over for Ukraine in the Donbas this year. No, the current estimate for Russia to conquer Donbas is 2 to 3 years of the current progress, and I think it would take even longer because the longer the war goes on, the less effective they become, and Ukraine's got enough money for at least 2 years and probably will improve from that point of view. And they've got problems with the economy. They're losing more soldiers for the first time in the war than they're able to recruit. So why do you think Russia is spending so much time trying to get Donald Trump to bully Ukraine into giving up Donbas diplomatically rather than militarily? Because they won't conquer it. That is, unless there's some huge technological or tactical development that they come up with, they're not going to get much further in this war in terms of territory conquered, and it's more likely to turn against them than in their favor. So let's see, now as the Pandora's box was opened back in the 1990s regarding Yugoslavia, Arbitration Commission on the Conference of Yugoslavia, now we are witnessing is all the after effects of this, reap what you sow. Well, it definitely was a decision that started, I guess, a chain of events. Let's see, we'd have to posit that, for example, Russia would not have invaded Ukraine if Yugoslavia hadn't dissolved. And then obviously with the whole debate about Kosovo. And I don't see any reason to believe that. Russia would have invaded anyways. Because they're a big power, a regional power, but they have nuclear weapons, they have a veto on the UN Security Council, and they're a revanchist empire. So they would have invaded anyways. I don't think it had really... I understand that you're trying to say it created a precedent, and it created a very small, minor one. For sure, US annexing Greenland would be, the real Pandora's box, because it's the US which has been the linchpin of the rules-based order, I mean, that's the term we use, deliberately violating themselves and actually conquering and annexing the territory of a neighbor. So I think that's obviously the last step, and then it doesn't exist at all. So we say that's Pandora's box. So yeah, I've been speaking for so long, my voice has gone a little bit. Maybe I'll have a glass of wine later after dinner. Enjoy my Sunday evening here. Where's the Vishivanka? Yeah, David, I wore it recently and I realized when I was putting it on I hadn't ironed it. So I have it here because there's no girl who's in the cover art, in the thumbnail. I did tell David before that I would wear the Vishivanka like she is, but okay, I reneged on that. Anyways, I think this is more appropriate for the discussion we're having today. Uruguay has beautiful beaches. Now Paraguay, I agree, of course, yeah. There's no seaside in Paraguay. Nylas or says, Poland is a great country for meeting women. I met a half Polish, half Ukrainian girl while I was in Wrocław. We are still in contact, like to see her again. Yeah, I mean, is it a great country for meeting women? I wouldn't say personally for this region, I don't think it's one of the top countries. I think with Polish women, if you don't speak Polish, the vast majority are not interested in foreigners at all. Of course, if you're a male model, famous, or a billionaire, well, probably it doesn't matter. But I see very obvious high value to them. Yeah, it's pretty difficult without speaking Polish or having a good social. If you have, obviously, if you have a high level social circle, especially those that are locally connected, like if you hang out with the high value Polish guys who are like in their 30s and 40s or even older, 50s, then yeah, then it can be a great place. But I think if you're hanging out in a digital nomad setup, yeah, I don't think it's a great place. I think you'd be better off in all the other countries than in Poland. And plus, you have just so many foreign guys going there, so you're even less special. There's huge foreigner fatigue. Nazis met her in a hostel he was staying in. You can meet girls in natural environments, not spamming in public areas. Actually, yeah, I agree with meeting in natural environments, just socializing basically, rather than being some weirdo walking around the street like that migrant gang of day gamers outside the train station. Now it says he's seen the generation gap also in Belarus. Big change since 2015, so we agree on that. Peter says, you mentioned advantage of learning local language. The translation technology has moved forward. Do you have a view? Have you tested or used the real-time translation tech? Well, I use Google Translate when I need to know something. And I've seen, I mean, basically, the tech that I've seen examples of, but I should give the backstory. I went to the Polyglot conference in 2014 when it first started, right? So it's for people who speak lots of languages or are language nerds, which includes me. And they had people there who were working on the technology that you now see with the translation technology. And they played clips back in 2014 that made it look like we wouldn't need to learn a foreign language almost at all already back in 2014. And they said that no one would learn languages within a decade. And obviously we're now more than a decade after that. And I had friends, because I was also involved in language learning, and I wasn't successful in launching business with that, but I was playing part of going to these conferences, giving talks, giving presentations on the topic. And they're still involved, and they have a very successful business. And they told me that the market for learning language is even bigger now than it was then, even with all the translation. They actually have an AI company, so to help you learn the language faster. So I just don't think it works well enough. I know it looks cool. You put on the earpods, you're going to hand someone else the earpods. You can use your Google Translate and it can speak out. That's a huge advantage. Like if I go to, let's say, Vietnam and I meet someone who doesn't speak English, I'm grateful that I have that and I can put in that. But, it's limited. And compared to having a natural conversation, no one, it can't compete yet. Maybe in the future it will be, but it would actually have to automatically translate coming out of our mouths the same thing naturally. I think getting people to put on, I don't know, earpiece or putting it into your phone and speaking and coming back waiting for translation is too long. It's useful in an emergency, but I think for socializing, I don't think people are going to have the patience for it. Maybe a bit of novelty in the beginning. Of course, if someone's really motivated to communicate with you, there's just so much interest, and you use that technology, then I think it's fine. But outside of that, I don't see it replacing learning languages for now. So if you learn a language, even if it takes 3 years to get the return on the investment, I think you can safely go and do it. Ceylon says, socializing, catfish is the new Olympic sport. Is it true, Mark says, that people in that region like Marlboro cigarettes and Ganesh cookies? No idea. I don't smoke cigarettes. And I don't have Danish cookies. Maybe Danish cookies. Wayne says Portugal is still cash-based, nowhere else that it's been. Okay, that's good feedback. So just Portugal, according to Wayne. Wayne has been traveling since we know each other quite well. Here, he's been to Ukraine a few times, has a Ukrainian girlfriend now. At least last I heard you did. Maybe give me an update if that's not the case. and Moldova. Where else have you been? You were with me in Riga. And yeah, you've been traveling a bit in Italy. Where else have you been? Portugal. You're based in Romania, so yeah, you can give us an overview where cash is used. So I went under. I don't know. This Q&A probably wasn't so long at the end of the day, was it? Only 15 minutes. So let me know your final questions. I've spoken for, what is it, over 2 hours? Getting up 2 hours and a half. Oh yeah. So Mark wants to know if the drone that I saw shot down was coming towards you. So I was about to walk out on a balcony, and there was an air alert. And when I was I was 3 meters from the door. I saw a huge flash and heard this loud bang. So obviously very close. And I was looking at the door because there's a small piece of glass in the door. And I was worried that the glass would shatter. And then obviously I would get hit by it. So there's kind of that apprehension for a second or two. Didn't happen. So I thought, okay, the blast wave, if it was close enough, would have come through. So I waited about another 2 seconds and then I opened the door. And then I walked down the balcony. I immediately smelled the smoke, and I could see where the smoke was. It was, as I said, within 100 meters. But it was above me, so it wouldn't have hit me anyways. But I was more worried about debris, obviously, when it gets shot down. That it still has to land somewhere, so that's the main issue. So, I mean, it's not really... That's the thing. I'm so used to it. I was not scared. Yeah. I think... Obviously back in 2022, because I left, I evacuated on day 2, February 25th, and then I came back within a month. We went to Western Ukraine, and Jen and I went there because we wanted to send some stuff. We brought some stuff to the border to help, to help the Ukrainians, both humanitarian aid and also some assistance for some soldiers who were already serving. And the first time that getting an air alert and knowing that there could be, Russian planes, because even at the time Russian planes were able to fly in a lot further. Not to Western Ukraine, I don't think, but the air defense wasn't as good. And I didn't sleep in the bed. We went and slept out in the corridor because we think, okay, 2 walls like this. But then you get used to, okay, what is the probability? And you look at your phone. And then so much of the time I'm asleep, and I wake up and, I woke up one morning and there was smoke on the horizon, but, it was well over 1 kilometer away where there had been an attack. And outside my window, I see air defense working all the time, shooting down drones. It's pretty common that I see it from my window. So unless something is really close, I don't feel really afraid. I get unnerved if I hear a sound that I haven't heard before, because then I don't know what it is. So it's more the unknown that's makes me more apprehensive than a known risk. I guess it's the known unknown. in that sense, that's actually scarier. Obviously, if something actually hits me or something, that's obviously terrifying. And I did have that time where I went left when I was jogging, and they fired these cluster munitions at people on the prom in Odesa. The Russians fired cluster munitions, killed lots of civilians, killed a dog, people out walking, on a summer's evening. So complete terrorist attack. And I jogged 1.4 kilometers to the left, and they hit it 1.4 kilometers to the right. So, I would have been, I only went to the right when I was jogging 10% of the time anyways. But, if I'd gone to the right then it would have been, if I'd survived it, extremely scary. So yeah, now they have these interceptor drones, and I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure that the interceptor drone basically makes a noise almost identical to the kamikaze drone. It's different, but in the beginning, when Ukraine started to use them, I didn't know the difference. So I thought that they were the kamikaze drones, and they were, they sounded like they were going past my window, like within, 100 meters or so. It was really close. Maybe it was further than 100 meters, but that was my perception. So that was scary. I jumped on the ground the first time because I thought, well, what was this about to hit the building? And but now I realize that they're interceptor drones and they make a different noise. So these are some of the things that, you learn when you're in a country of war for this amount of time. Like often I see in interviews with these people who don't want to evacuate villages, in particular near to the front lines, they can recognize every type of ordnance from the way it sounds when it's been fired. So they know, oh, this is this. We better go in to the basement if we can make it in time. And this they fire these things a lot and they don't normally land there. So you just get used to judging the risk, right? Of course, it can go all wrong in an instant if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's basically what it comes down to. So I would say that it wasn't a scary experience. However, if you were like that guy I mentioned who was who was being persuaded by a dodgy matchmaker to come to Ukraine with no inner interest in the country other than finding a wife, if he had been there, he would have been terrified because he doesn't have the experience. He's here for a pretty vacuous reason, let's be frank about it. And he's not psychologically prepared for the situation he's going into. It depends on who you are. And that's why I say, like, you need to be prepared for psychological impact, but not necessarily that is dangerous per se to come to Odesa or to Kyiv. But obviously Kyiv, there's a big inconvenience with energy and heating at the moment. Drone wars. Yeah, I mean, if Russian forces can suddenly start doing what they do in Kherson, which is basically where they hunt civilians with FPV drones and kill them, just complete and utter terrorism. It's such a scandalous war crime. And if they could do that in Odessa, I wouldn't stay here. It's just like, because then the risk level is too high. But still, some people live in Kherson. They just get chased. And they did that in that Swedish-speaking village, Gammelspensvik, that I went and featured twice in my videos. I don't think there's anyone living there anymore. They basically, from the other side of the river, just fucking killed the old people living there. Just kept hunting them with drones. It's disgusting. It's also weird. They occupied the village, so they could have murdered everybody then. And they told the people, because some Swedes who are part of that community reached out to me. They threatened them. They said, hey, we're going to bomb you from the... At the time, they didn't have the drones when they were forced to retreat. So they were firing artillery. And they threatened the villagers that when they're going to fire and destroy their town from the other side of the river with artillery. And that's what they started doing. And then most of the people left because it became unsafe. And then they hunted the remaining old people who want to leave with drones and murdered them. But it's maybe the distance when they do it on using a drone or using artillery where they don't have to look at the people or they feel detached more. Or maybe it's just a different group of people who are doing the killing. But yeah, psychotic mass murderers. Kind of curious to look at this psychology. It was also happened with the Holocaust. The reason the Nazis use these extermination centers as opposed to shooting people into mass graves, which is what they did at the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, was that the people they used in the Einsatzgruppe, which were the units that would go after the soldiers and kill civilians, basically en masse, they had a huge desertion rate, or people claiming medical problems. Basically, after a few weeks or months, most people they recruited into it didn't want to keep shooting civilians and murdering them day after day. And that's why they came up with using poison gas and extermination centers where they would make it more detached from the person who would do the killing. And in the end, they were just putting a canister of poison gas into a shaft, and then they were using other prisoners to clean out the gas chambers afterwards, after they had murdered people. So, and then getting them to light bonfires. Eventually they came up crematoria. So I guess this is part of the human psychology in war crimes. So anyways, not the most uplifting topic. Wayne says, and that could be coming to other parts of the world. That's the reality. This technology, or, now we're in a new era where conflict looks almost certain to increase. Wars are going to increase. And we dodged a bullet with the deterrence of Trump trying to annex Greenland. Yeah, you would have had Danish and American troops exchanging fire and almost certainly killing each other. And then it would have been, with the precedent of the U.S. annexing territory of a neighbor, using armed force, killing people. We would see almost certainly giving ideas to so many other countries. Nuclear weapons, we're going to see nuclear proliferation as a result. U.S. security guarantee. Does anyone really think that if basically it's if the idea of deterrence is that you never have to actually demonstrate that you're going to come to Latvia, Lithuania's aid. But now Russia can gamble. He's talking about like the other members wouldn't come to our aid if it was the case, even though that's false, obviously. Yeah, this is undermining the deterrence factor. So then it gets tested. And yeah, I wouldn't want to be relying on a security guarantee from the US. That's why I think that Poland, especially with this president, he's kind of thrown his lot in with relying on the US security guarantee. But unfortunately, Poland's building a big army. Anyways, back to other issues, other topics. Wayne says he still has a girlfriend, as far as he knows. We'll see in the meet in 2 weeks' time. Okay. The next 2 weeks go. Okay. Yeah, let me know your plans for travel as well if you're heading somewhere in the region. Maybe you're back here in Odesa, Mama. Okay, any more questions, comments? And if you're planning to come here, some ways I can help you are, yeah, I'm looking at my computer now rather than the camera. Yeah, so some ways that I can help you if you're coming to the region. Guides down below for Moldova and Ukraine. You get access to my hospitality guides, so my favorite cafes, restaurants, bars, clubs, and shisha lounges will save you a lot of time when you're coming here. And ChatGPT doesn't help so far with finding these things. I tried it for some cities and it was a complete waste of time. It would have sent me to the wrong places. Would have wasted my time if I was relying on it. So yeah, you get those insider tips. Those two are down below. So that's a great companion for coming here. If you want to jump on a call with me and get my encyclopedic knowledge for the region, I'm a former lawyer, so background in international relations. And yeah, I definitely have the most practical experience in terms of relationships here, whether it's creating a social circle with high-level guys or dating the beautiful women, the model women of the region. A lot of my clients, they're now married, having kids with models from, Belarus or Ukraine or Russia or somewhere else in the region. So yeah, you can jump on a call with me if you just want to have a call, reach out, and we can do this and create your strategic plan for success in the region. If you want my personal mentoring in person, so an in-person immersion, then that is the New Europe experience, rebranded from the Czar experience for obvious reasons with this war. And you can apply down below because it's by application only. And I would definitely make a lot more money if I accepted everybody and did a group trip. That was another question I got. Someone asked me, hey, do you do, like, I don't know, I guess they thought it was a romance tour. No, I don't do that. I don't think it is an effective way. It's an effective way to make a lot of money in the past for sure, but I don't think it's effective for success in general. I don't want to organize that. That's probably why my original business advisors were not too impressed by my feedback, because they were like, that is the easiest way to make money. It's already a lovely business model. And we see, anyways, that romance tours, there aren't very many going on in Ukraine nowadays or in the region. So probably long term, it was maybe just for the best that I didn't invest my time. That created something a little bit more unique. And yeah, help you in other ways. So any more questions or comments for you guys who are on? Or maybe there's even some women on. I don't know. Who's watching me at the moment? Anything else I want to say? Slava Ukraini, of course. And yeah, I am more and more optimistic about Ukraine's chances. We managed to avoid the calamitous situation of the US invading Greenland for now. And we'll see what happens. Yeah, maybe I comment on the US. Man, things don't look good in the US. I think the US is still a great place to make money if you've got an in-person business or bricks and mortar business. I think it's one of the best places on the planet. But in terms of quality of life, still good, still one of the better places on the planet, but civil strife looks pretty bad at the moment. Think about it. I would be more worried about being stopped by someone in uniform in the US than I would be in Ukraine with martial law during the war. And that says a lot about the US, even before this Trump administration and this whole ICE debacle. And being a foreigner, I certainly wouldn't be super enthusiastic to go to the US at the moment. And definitely not to Minneapolis, but I've never been there, so. And had no plans to go there anyways, but yeah, somewhere else, who knows? They start doing it in other parts where I frequent. Is the war dying down? Well, the war goes on, and it's mainly on the front lines. Obviously, we're affected by rocket and drone attacks by Russia here. But as I said, I have only had, my electricity has only been out for 2 hours in the last month and no problems with heating and electricity. On the other hand, in Kyiv, it's been a catastrophe. So there's a lot of back and forth between Zelensky and Klitschko. Vitaly Klitschko is the mayor of Kyiv. So they're kind of passing blame from the federal, central government to the city authorities. And yeah, also Klitschko could be in the future a political rival to Volodymyr Zelensky. But I actually don't think that Zelensky will run again. That's my prediction at the moment. I think Budanov becoming chief of staff is kind of indicative of, and I predicted that 6 months ago, that while everyone was talking about Zelensky and Poroshenko, and I guess Timoshenko, because the two of those are previously established candidates, one had been president, one had been prime minister. I actually always thought Budanov was more likely. He's younger, and possibly he will run and take over from Zelensky at a certain point. Oh, you're actually in Odesa, Wayne. Okay, good to know. So that's why you said, let's see how the next 2 weeks go. So fingers crossed, it all works out. Another Ukrainian-American relationship. We're still allies with the people of America. But the assistance from the US is pretty limited at the moment. Some intel sharing, and they're selling weapons to European allies of Ukraine to pass on. That is it. Ukraine, and basically most of the war effort is being conducted, the defense effort is conducted by Europe. But we'll see if Trump ruins the whole transatlantic relationship with them, he leaves or not. I think that he will not manage that completely, but I think there will be definitely a different attitude going forward. And it may actually have a positive effect on European solidarity and the European Union, and Europe as a global power may even become a global power as a result, because the situation that we've had where the US takes the lead on defense in Europe, something the US insisted on since Eisenhower. They didn't want Europe to become a rival militarily, and you see a lot of disputes between the US and the EU on trade matters, because economically the EU is a rival of the US and China. So if it becomes a military rival, we'll also have disputes in other ways. So Europeans got to spend less on defense themselves, but then they bought US equipment, which is kind of a way of paying tribute without saying it's tribute. And they relied on their new nuclear strategic deterrent. So no European countries right now has strategic nuclear weapons. They have tactical nuclear weapons, France and the UK. And the rest of the countries didn't bother investing in it because, well, they have the US security umbrella, conventionally and nuclear. But if we don't have that anymore, or if it's been questioned, not effective, then other countries have to build up their militaries. And they will use them for other things other than defense eventually. And also the nuclear deterrent will probably be developed by, I would think, Poland at a certain point. I don't know with the current president whether that can be, he can be blocking that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Poland has some sort of nuclear program secretly. It would be wise for them to develop it. Same with the Ukrainians, since they gave up their nuclear deterrent with the Budapest Memorandum in exchange for security assurances. And now they've been told to give up Donbas for something that's not even security assurances. So yeah, they're obviously not going to do that. So no, the war is not dying down at all. More Russians are being killed now than at any other time than in the war, because what's happened is that Russia, two things have happened. The technology has evolved in terms of drones. It makes it very hard to use armored vehicles. And Russia actually burnt through a large part of their Soviet era stockpiles that they could renovate and use. So I don't know which is the bigger factor in them suddenly not using so many armored vehicles. Russia now for the first time loses less armored vehicles in the war than Ukraine, because they just don't use them. What they do is they send infantry forward on quad bikes, on motorbikes, on scooters, on horseback, even occasionally. It may even be more effective to use a horse. I don't know. Could be even a tactical reason to do that. Or they use these kind of cloaks and they're trying to walk forward at night, but they're using way more infantry, not transporting them with vehicles than in the past. And as a result, the Ukrainians claim anyways they kill more Russians now than they did in the past at any other time in the war, and in a higher ratio, and that now for the first time Russia loses more soldiers than they're able to recruit. So of course that's what the Ukrainian authorities say, so it's not like that's gospel, and you have to question that. But definitely the tactics have changed, and there is a certain amount of sense, and we'll see over time whether that turns out to be the case or not. We'll see, in 6 months, 12 months, with more obituaries in Russia as an indication of whether they're losing more soldiers or not, and whether they end up having less soldiers in Ukraine. I definitely wouldn't be relying on the Russian sources or any of the pro-Russian commentators on YouTube telling you that Russia only lost 200,000 casualties in the war, when even, I said this on my geopolitics channel, that if you just do the basic math, Russia says they recruited 30,000 men per month for the last 3 years, plus the original army, plus they press ganged the men of Donbas. They occupied Donbas and a lot of the occupied territories, except for Crimea, into the army, plus they had foreign fighters. And if you add all of that up, it's well over, like, it's probably 1.5 million. And very few people get demobilized. A few, like the original prisoners who signed up for Wagner, if they survive 6 months pregnant, they could leave. But all the other contracts are just renewed. People can bribe their way out, that's true. Because it's Russia, it's corrupt, but we don't have any figures for that. But even the ultra-nationalists have started to say, hey, what I said a month earlier than them, if you do the math, we should have, we only lost 200,000, then we should, with there's only like 700,000 men in the Russian army, or forces, men and women in the Russian military in Ukraine. So what happened to the other like million or so people? It's actually way more than 1.5 million when you add it up. And yeah, I mean, maybe 100,000 at most were demobilized, but I don't know how many people were able to bribe their way out of the military. Maybe it could be just really desertion. So maybe they're not actually dead or wounded. But definitely in total, they have well over this 1 million mark. But it could be the unknown number is desertion in the Russian military. It's not reported on. It's thought to be very low. They had these rumors of barrier forces that would shoot them if they didn't go forward, so it was hard to desert. But I think, it's Russia. People can bribe their way out surely when they realize how bad it is on them. Think about it, like you got the signing up bonus, you serve for a month. Well, corrupt officials take a large part of your signing up bonus if you give it to them for you to leave. I think that's possible in Russia. So, yeah, I need to be looking here. I started to read the comments more. Kyivians blame Klitschko from my friends there. Yeah, I think so. And definitely Zelensky made some stern statements about him. And Klitschko, there was a reputation for some funny business before the war when he's mayor of Kyiv. But again, I just hear rumors. I mean, are they accurate enough? I don't know. But definitely different municipalities have not used the money well. We had that scandal also at the federal level, I guess, with some of Zelensky's friends and the energy sector, and charging top up some contracts. There were kickbacks, and that money could have gone into reinforcing the defenses of the energy sector. So, but definitely Klitschko is it's probably undermined his popularity for sure. So when he runs for re-election, whether that's for mayor of Kyiv or for presidency, it could affect him pretty badly. Klitschko is very popular outside of Ukraine. Like, I think he's way more popular than he's inside. And probably Zelensky is as well to a certain extent. Yeah. Like, who's really popular in Ukraine? It only seems Zaluzhny. And yeah, I have a lot of reservations if he were to become president. And but yeah, we don't know. It hasn't been tested, obviously, with this war. Lads and ladies, if there are any ladies there, which I doubt, but let me know your comments and your questions. I think I set a record for the longest live stream I've done, but I didn't do one for a few weeks, and I'm not really planning to do another one for a few weeks. So I will have videos. I say this in every live stream because I said, and I didn't have a video last time. Somebody even wrote, "Where are your videos?" So I have the final comments I'm just giving for a video about 5 do's and don'ts for coming to Ukraine. So I guess I commented on a lot of it here, but you'll get a lot more. A different format for that information. That video is coming. Plus I have like a Ukraine 2026 video for coming. A little bit more about traveling and what to expect in each of the cities. Plus got about doing business here in Ukraine, because I think that's what a lot of guys are interested. The ones, it's obviously very niche guys who are coming to Ukraine now anyways, who are part of my audience. And yeah, doing business is one of the main reasons. The other thing is, but Wayne he has a girlfriend here. And yeah, in the coming weeks, I need to get to speak to my video editor probably tomorrow about editing up the vlogs. I think now is the time to release them in the coming weeks in anticipation of 2026. So we'll have 3 fashion shows, because I went to fashion shows in Chisinau, Riga, and Almaty. And I'll have the summer vlog from Chisinau from 2025. And I still need to do the vlog from Warsaw, but I need to go back to Warsaw. Maybe in the spring when I go with my client, I'll finally finish up that vlog. So there'll be 3 vlogs coming in. I keep meaning to do these reaction videos. I might do them before I leave. I also need to film the parts from my Ukrainian language program. If you're interested in that program, then write me an email. I can still give you the pre-sale price, I guess, for this week before I actually film it. Since I'm, again, tardy on actually following through with that. But finally, we're making some real progress. I did have my teacher was supposed to do it originally, but she just didn't produce it. So yeah, and I had to move on from that idea that she's going to do it with the war. She's actually doing great work with the Ukrainian forces, and she's not in the front line, she's somewhere else a lot of the time. And yeah, but yeah, she said she would do it because AI can speed it up, and then she just didn't produce it. And I'm like, yeah, waiting till the war is over, hopefully sometime in the second half of 2026, but I think it'll be more likely in 2027. So did I say, I don't think I know this whole live stream, I didn't say whether it's good to come to Ukraine or not, but Wayne is evidence from a dating point of view. Wayne is evidence that it can be good. He's here in Odesa with a local girlfriend. And I would say that definitely, I also speak Ukrainian as well as Russian. I have a local social circle. I'm quite social. Yeah, I think it's pretty good as a spot to be a single guy. I think the ratio has come back into balance. But I also think Riga is great. I think Almaty is great. I also would have no complaints living in Warsaw, even though I don't think it's good for most of the guys who promoted and going there. I think it's not at all. But I would also, yeah, not find it a problem. Is Tallinn, yeah, not as good as Riga, but still a single guy, decent. Vilnius, maybe a little bit less. Although one of my clients, he got on best with the Lithuanian girls. So again, different horses for different courses. And yeah, if you hang out a lot in Chisinau, then it's good. I think it's just a bit tricky if you just go for a weekend. But yeah, Chisinau, Moldova, also a great spot. I love all the places. That's why I bring my clients here, because I genuinely love them all. And I'm looking forward to whenever this war does end. And I believe it will end on the balance probabilities in Ukraine's favor, in the sense that either we'll have some sort of stalemate, or Ukraine will retake all the currently occupied territory. Igor Girkin, Strelkov, the Russian ultranationalist war criminal who's sitting in prison in Russia because he criticizes Putin, he agrees with my assessment. He comes up with the same assessment. So he thinks it's almost impossible for Moscow to win with the current, well, definitely with the current leadership. Someone asked me, he wants to find a tech job in Latvia as a developer IT. Are there any? I'm sure there are. Reach out to me, send me an email or set up a call if you want to dive into that more. Not sure it's the best place to be a developer, but you know, cost of living wise, I think maybe Estonia is a bit better for the IT sector than Latvia, but they all got possibilities. But send me an email, connor@connorklein.com. It's an interesting query. Anything else I should mention? On this January evening, it's the winter. It's snowing outside. It's really it was a bit colder last week. And you can go skiing in Ukraine. I didn't mention that. You can go to the Carpathians. I will see if I'm going to ski in Almaty still, which is probable but not certain. Then I would need to go and pick up my skis, and I would, because they're not here in Ukraine. and my ski and my clothes and stuff. It's not just, I did think, I know I can rent skis at the resort, but I would need to get all my skiing gear anyways. I'm not going to buy duplicates again because I already have, 2 of everything. I don't want to spend another few thousand just on that. I might as well just go and pick it up and pay to transport it, because it'll just be, it's an excuse to go where they are as well. But it will probably cost me an extra, I was looking at it, it's probably going to cost me an extra 300, 500, plus putting them on. There'll be at least 600 more to bring them. So, but that's also the clothes, my boots. Yeah, if I rent them in Almaty, it's not going to be that expensive. I don't know, would it cost me $100 for the week? But then I have to buy the clothes again, and they're going to cost me more than 500. So I guess it makes sense to bring them. Yeah, I have 2 nice jackets. I have all this stuff, yeah. Kind of annoying, because I didn't ever intend to ski that far away and not have them with me. Because the real expense, I actually got to fly to where they are, pick them up, and then it's more expensive to fly to Kazakhstan from there than it is from Chisinau. Chisinau is actually pretty cheap to fly to Kazakhstan. If it's a little bit ahead of time, I can get there one way for 200 euros. But it'll cost me 200 euros to get where the skis are. And I think it cost me at least, it might cost me 500 to get out to Almaty one way then. So that's kind of why. But we'll see. Last minute I can look at the price differential. Yeah, so you can ski in the Carpathians. They've been open the whole time for during the summer and the winter since this war, this invasion. Not since the war happened. The war started in 2014, but since the invasion of 2022. So it's not a super cheap resort. It's because a lot of Ukrainians go there. It's a great place, especially for men who don't have permission to leave. They can't ski in the Alps, so they go to Bukovel and the Carpathians. So a lot of partying going on there at the moment, I can see. And price of food seems a bit of a cartel price. It was double of Odesa. One of my friends was there recently, so it was a bit surprising. But ski resorts in general, things are expensive. Obviously, there's a markup. But because Almaty is just 45 minutes from the city center, I mean, with traffic, it'll probably take us longer. There's some amazing restaurants here by as well. One is called Owl, really amazing restaurant. Stopped by there, but we needed to have booked, but we just sampled a little bit of the stuff at the bar. That's definitely something that we're going to check out. So yeah, want to apply, fill up the application form. If not, send me an email. And if there's something else you want to discuss, Connor@connorklein.com. We got the guides, as I said, for Moldova and Ukraine that you can purchase down below. I do have a guide I will finish for Kazakhstan, for Almaty and Astana. I just don't know when I'm going to finish it. But if you want that, you can write me an email as well. And one for Latvia. I actually put Latvia and Lithuania together. Maybe I need to break them out. But when I go back to Latvia, I'll finish that one. So, I see I have some private messages. Someone who's on this chat. Any final questions? Any final points you want to make? Otherwise, I'm going to close this out. And what time is this? 10:50. Oh, the supermarkets will be closed. And the restaurants. Wow, it's so long that it's good that I have some cheese and I have some wine, I have some eggs there. Yeah, that's something to do a little bit more actually. I have some food at home nowadays because of curfew. If I go to the gym late, my gym is open until 10. So I have something at home. So no final points or questions. How long to become A2 fluency for Latvian? A2. Ooh. I would say it would take a year and a half. Year and a half to 2 years. That's my estimate. Of course, a lot of factors. Are you going to live in Latvia at the time? You're going to speak it every day. You're going to take private tuition. How frequently? Obviously, you can speed these things up. How committed are you? And but I would say give it a year and a half to 2 years to reach that level. Any other follow-up questions? I'm going to bid you all a pleasant evening from Odesa, Mom, in Ukraine, where it is freezing outside. Snow is on the ground, very atmospheric, on the shores of the Black Sea. Oh, I should look over here again. So where's my camera? Is right there, right? Am I looking at the right spot? I'll say it again. So I wish you a very pleasant evening from Odesa Mama, on the shores of the Black Sea, from free Ukraine. Obviously, this is very niche. If you're planning to come here to Ukraine in 2026, I wish you a very safe trip. If you need any help with it, reach out to me or invest in some of the services I have. Definitely make your trip more pleasant, more valuable, and hopefully you'll get the most out of it and reach your goals faster and more efficiently. And if you're interested in the alternatives, that was the other half. We discussed mainly the alternatives in this region, the ones I bring my clients to, a little bit about the global alternatives. Riga in Latvia, if you're single and you like the leggy blondes, best place to go to. Also Tallinn in Estonia, also Vilnius in Lithuania, Warsaw, Poland, Chisinau, Moldova, and Astana, and Almaty in Kazakhstan. Application form down below. I'm going to be going back for sure to Kazakhstan. It's become the most popular recently for some unknown reason after a big hiatus. And also to Warsaw, Poland, probably to Riga in Latvia. And I will, in any case, be passing through Chisinau, Moldova. I love to go there. So whether you're planning to come to Ukraine or one of the alternatives, let me know how it goes for you. Let me know your questions and your comments down below if you're watching this on replay, and if you reach out to me in some capacity if you want that more personalized touch, bespoke advice, and my personal mentoring. So I wish you harna večera, which is a pleasant evening from Odessa. Slava Ukraini, Rom Slava, do Peremohi. And see you very soon.